Today's episode of the Bill Simmons Podcast on the Ringer Podcast Network, brought to you by ZipRecruiter. You know, there's a difference between working hard and working smart. There's some NBA teams that work hard. Doesn't necessarily matter. The Orlando Magic, they try hard. They're barely a playoff team. You got to work smart too. ZipRecruiter has the tools to make hiring more efficient and effective. It's the smartest way to hire. Their powerful technology scans thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience for your job. So effective, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within the first day. Right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free. ZipRecruiter.com/BS. Meanwhile, if you're shopping for a business, you'll find the supplies you need at Zorro.com, ZORO.com. At Zorro, you can get tools, safety, and office items, cleaning supplies, and more. In one stop, Zorro has great brands like Stanley, Black & Decker, Prestone, 3M, Rubbermaid. Visit Zorro.com/BS. Sign up for Z-Mail to get 15% off. ZORO.com. All you need to make your business go. We're also brought to you by one of the world's last great websites, the Ringer.com, where if you love football and you love the NFL draft, Danny Kelly, his 2.0 draft guide is out right now. If you love Survivor, not only do we have recaps, but we on the Ringer Dish feed, Riley McAtee is going to be hosting a Survivor weekly recap pod. Kyle, you like Survivor?
It's been a while.
It's so good this year.
Yeah.
You should watch it, and then you should listen to the podcast afterwards. The rewatchables, we did Higher Learning this week. We have Vision Quest coming up next week. Yeah, the greatest wrestling movie of all time and the only wrestling movie of all time. Check that out. Book of Basketball, 2 episodes left. Got one next week, one the week after, and then season 1 is over. Coming up, I'm going to do the 5-year Oscars with Sean Fennessey and Chris Ryan, as well as a long conversation with Rachel Nichols, our friend from ESPN. That's all coming up. First, our friends from Pearl Jam. All right, Chris Ryan and Sean Fennessey are here. Every year we do the 5-year Oscars. We wait until the Oscars has happened 5 years before, and we relitigate it. We go backwards, and we decide whether everyone made the right call. After the Oscars happened, got some feedback from people, and they were like, where the fuck was the 5-year Oscars? And it was like, well, it hasn't been 5 years yet, motherfucker.
Chill out. Relax.
Chill out. The Oscars happened on February 22nd, 2015. Well, guess what? We're at the 5-year mark. It's not our fault they moved the Oscars up.
Okay, motherfucker.
Okay, motherfucker.
Who reached out to you?
I saw some emails.
Okay.
A couple of really hurt emails. People have hurt.
Like the president of the Academy. He was like, "Where's your podcast about this?"
Michael Keaton was like, "Hey, man, didn't know Birdman still made it."
Yeah.
So we're gonna go through. We're gonna do the 4 acting categories. We're going to do director, and then we'll end with picture.
Can you remind Chris and I of your rules for this?
Yeah, we were trying to remember this.
All right. I barely remember them myself.
Okay.
But here are my rules.
This is the apex mountain of 5-year Oscar
Yes,
pods.
the apex mountain of theories. 5 years later, you look back at the year and you want to think, oh, it was that year when this happened, and this stands out. And if I'm looking at, which I'm doing right now, I'm looking at the Wikipedia of all the categories with the winners, and I'm upset at a winner, or I'm surprised that there was somebody that didn't get it. Like we talked about Ben Affleck, we're going to talk about for Gone Girl. He wasn't even nominated. And now I look at the list of the 5, and I'm like, wow, we didn't nominate Ben Affleck. But, here's what happened in 2014 leading into the 15 Oscars. Just some movies for people out there to remember. This was Birdman, American Sniper, Boyhood, Grand Budapest Hotel, Imitation Game, Selma, Whiplash, Gone Girl. Did I mention Gone Girl yet? This was The Judge, which looked like the most Oscar-y movie on paper.
Yep.
And it's the opposite of that.
Yeah, never really got there.
Big for Downey superfan Chris Ryan, though.
Yeah, true.
Big for Robert Duvall's incontinence, too.
This was
a disgusting movie.
It's a deep cut. If you haven't seen The Judge, you don't know what I'm talking about. But
this was Interstellar.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's probably a C- movie year would be my take. Looking back, thinking about it, especially compared to this year, Sean.
I thought it was a pretty decent blockbuster year.
Yeah.
Because you've got Guardians of the Galaxy. You got the first Captain America movie. You got Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which is pretty good. 22 Jump Street.
Mm-hmm.
That was fun. Interstellar was a big hit. Edge of Tomorrow. So the blockbuster stuff was actually pretty cool. It's the Oscar stuff this really feels like one of the worst in a long time.
It's the collection of movies that are nominated here compared to actually what happened when a lot of people were making their best of the decade lists and movies from this year were coming up like Under the Skin. And that's barely even nominated in any of these categories.
True. And Edge of Tomorrow, I think that's one where if we redid this, I think that would get a Best Picture nomination because I think that's become one of the most beloved 2015 movies. That's why we love to do this exercise because I think you get caught up sometimes in the moment with certain movies, certain narratives. I'll be interested to see if it happens with Parasite 5 years from now. I thought Parasite was a really good movie. I'll be curious to see 5 years from now if we're like, wow, that actually won Best Picture.
I think we will look at it shocked because we're probably going to get a terrible movie to win next year, but I don't think people are going to regret choosing it as Best Picture. I think people are.
But I think all three of us think Once Upon a Time will be the one that we kind of thought should have won.
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, it might have.
Depends who you ask.
Yeah. There was so much warm regard for that movie that different from this movie too. Like in 2014, there were a lot of good movies that just weren't even really recognized at all. Like,
it's also pretty cool to look back because for this year that we're talking about in this pod, the Bong Joon-ho movie from this year was Snowpiercer, which had such a troubled production and was delayed getting out into theaters, and now seems like, will be part of like this guy's the sort of Americanized version of this guy's career.
Totally.
As like a foundational movie.
That movie stars Captain America.
Yeah.
That felt in the moment like that movie was really underrated.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And
it got this cool mythology around it though, because we knew that Harvey Weinstein was kind of fucking with it, so it got a bit of a cult built around it.
Yeah.
But it just didn't. It should have come out like a year earlier than it did.
One of my other favorite movies came out this year. Not that it matters for Oscars.
Can I guess what it is? Is it Nonstop?
Babadook.
Yeah.
That's a top 7 2010s horror movie.
That also the
Maybe
movie had
top
like
5.
was that on Netflix? I feel like that had like a really good Netflix run.
Probably.
We still had, I think, more movies were popping up on Netflix after theatrical release at this time, and we're getting second lives, whereas that happens less frequently now.
There's also a couple smaller movies, Force Majeure, which now just got remade as a Will Ferrell thing. I thought that was good. Dear White People was a memorable 2014
Big Sundance
movie. That
what about John Wick? I mean, we didn't even talk about John Wick. This is Inherent Vice?
Well, so the John Wick thing's interesting because that movie didn't really fully blossom until it hit cable.
That's right.
So I remember in 2015, I did a bunch of Grantland Oscar stuff with Wesley and Chris Connolly. I don't even think we talked about John Wick once during, like, we did a huge preview show and then we did an actual show, and it was the tale of John Wick. Now you think of it and you're like, I don't think it gets any nominations.
Yeah,
but it's hard to
violent.
separate this movie from 2014. Chef was this year as well. All right, let's do the categories.
Okay.
We're going to blow through this. Best Actor. The nominees: Steve Carell in Foxcatcher. Never understood that one. Bradley Cooper in American Sniper. Benedict Cumberbatch, Imitation Game. Michael Keaton in Birdman, who was the heavy favorite as we went into this. And then it flipped because the winner was Eddie Redmayne for The Theory of Everything. He played Stephen Hawking. This didn't sit right with me at the time. I don't feel that strongly about it 5 years later where there's somebody I look at and I go, that person should have won. At gunpoint, I'd probably say Keaton,
And
but I don't
also,
feel strongly about
There's
it.
also I would say 50, maybe better than 50% chance that will be the last great Michael Keaton role that he would get nominated for. So
Right.
we probably may have missed the last
What
opportunity.
about Spider-Man Homecoming?
Well, I mean,
thought there
it's-
was good work there.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't make that many movies.
No, this is a very bad win. This is like a classic. The Oscars fucked it up, and he won the BAFTA, he won the SAG award, Eddie Redmayne won all those awards, even though everybody wanted Michael Keaton to win. And it reminds me a lot of the Renee Zellweger Judy win this year, where it was just like everybody just decided that Eddie Redmayne deserved an Oscar for playing Stephen Hawking. Real person, high degree of difficulty, where he has to make a transformation. They always reward that. And no, has a single human rewatched this movie since 2016?
No,
Redman's in a weird zone because, like, aside from those magical beasts movies, what they are.
Yeah, just keep going with that.
They like all he does is make movies where you're like, did that movie ever come out? But he's nominated for an Oscar.
It just what was the movie last year? Shape of Water.
2 years ago, yeah.
That 2 years ago, we'll never have a conversation about again in our lives. And The Theory of Everything is another one like that. Birdman was a really cool movie experience, and I think from a rewatchability standpoint, has not really stood the test of time.
Have not fired up.
I agree.
It's kind of come and gone.
It has. I think that's right.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why we're not more upset about this Michael Keaton thing. Is there a case for Bradley Cooper in American Sniper? Because I would say that was 5 years later the most important movie of 2014 from a box office impact, putting people in a different position in their careers, kind of what it stood for. This is going to sound weird, but that it comes out, a year and a half before the 2016 election.
Yes.
And the way it resonated and all the money it made, and people are like, wow, this is crazy. Never expected this. And it's like, maybe we shouldn't have been surprised at all.
You're absolutely right.
It's
it was a major red state hit. It was just huge among a certain movie-going audience. I mean, it's like over $300 million. It's a major movie.
It was 400.
Yeah.
But this was a classic. The bubbles didn't think this was going to be a thing. And meanwhile, in 3/4 of the United States, people loved this movie and went multiple times.
Totally. It was a holiday phenomenon. And I don't really love it. Like, I don't want to sound like a cultural elite, but it's like, it's not, I don't think it's one of Clint Eastwood's best movies like this. And he's made a lot of movies like this about real life people who have complicated stories and are seen by some as heroes and seen by some as villains. The story of this guy's life in the movie is fascinating. There's just an incredible New Yorker story about him.
Douglas Kyle.
Yes. But I would encourage people to read that over rewatching American Sniper.
So you would go Keaton here.
Well, I'm going to... The biggest omission and the one that really just sucks, and the Steve Carell thing. I like Steve Carell, but Foxcatcher is not a good movie and shouldn't have been rewarded in anyway. And Affleck not getting it for Gone Girl, it bothered me when it happened. And now as that movie has become what it's become, and we did a rewatchables about it recently, he's really good in that movie. And it's a great example of the characters, the Venn diagram of Ben Affleck and the character. There's something there. It's probably the last great Ben Affleck leading man performance. I haven't seen The Way Back yet.
What about The Accountant?
Yeah, as I said. But I thought that was a hard part. And it was a part, there's the legendary story about John Hamm could have had that part. And then Matthew Weiner said he couldn't have it. And if John Hamm's in Gone Girl, is that a different movie? Is it better? Is it worse? I don't know. But
has John Hamm played 11 FBI agents since then? If not,
maybe he's an FBI agent in Gone Girl.
Yeah.
I mean, the Academy... I don't know if they don't like Ben Affleck, but they just don't respect him as an actor. He's never been nominated for an acting performance. He won for screenplay in 96 or 98, and he won picture for Argo, and he was a producer on that movie. But that year, he famously was snubbed as director, and he's never been nominated as an actor. And he's a good actor. He's not just a good movie star. He's really good in Gone Girl.
Agree.
And I don't think there was any conversation about him being nominated. It felt like Hollywood was still holding something against him.
I think
somehow.
It was just because he won the year before.
Yeah.
He won for Argo, and it was like, you got your due. So
one other person who I thought should have been nominated that we never really talked about was Miles Teller.
And he gets kind of overlooked because of J.K. Simmons, and because every sort of memorable moment from Whiplash is always not my tempo or whatever, but I would not compare him pound for pound to this, but this is like one of those. I thought when I saw it, I thought it was like, I wonder if this is going to be like The Graduate, where you see somebody and you then go on to see them for the next 25 years. Because it just felt like such a precocious, amazing...
You bought so much Teller stock.
I still have it. I'm still long on it.
I still have it. I haven't sold one.
I will not sell
penny.
it.
Top Gun Maverick is coming.
And don't try to weaken my stock. Don't try to like publicly...
I'm shorting it.
Yeah.
I'm shorting Miles. After Too Old to Die Young, I shorted it.
When he flies an F-16 past your house and just goes...
I got a confession for you guys. I like the Fire movie.
What's that one called?
I can't remember.
It's a movie where everybody dies in the end except Miles Teller.
Jesus. Just going to say, it's possibly the most depressing movie.
Yeah, it's really depressing,
Yeah.
but I thought he was good in it.
He had
And
blonde hair
I thought the movie was good.
He's also a guy who, similar to Cooper in American Sniper, he likes to take on a physical endurance in his performances. And Whiplash is
like
total, totally.
Chris has been like that.
He's a 12-hour podcaster.
So we didn't mention Cumberbatch. I'm fine with that. The one that stands out is Steve Carell, and I don't think he should have been in there. All due respect to him.
Okay. Yeah.
You agree?
I didn't really have a problem. I don't think I ever had as much of a problem with Foxcatcher as you did.
Same. I liked it.
I'm more offended that Redmayne won than anybody didn't get nominated.
Completely agree.
It just should have been a documentary.
Let's just say Keaton.
Best actress. This was one of the weakest years we've ever had. We had what's her name? Sean Marion
Cotillard.
Yeah. 2 Days, One Night. I can't remember what that movie was about. Felicity
I'd be surprised
Jones.
if you saw it. It was a very small film made by the Dardenne brothers, and because it was such a weak year, she got nominated, even though she's been better in other movies, honestly.
Felicity Jones, Theory of Everything. Rosamund Pike and Gone Girl. Reese Witherspoon and Wild, which I thought Reese Witherspoon was good in that movie. And then Julianne Moore and Still Alice. I thought Julianne...
Don't call me lady!
She's awesome in that movie. I'm fine with this result.
You were banging Still Alice stuff?
Yeah, I thought she was really good in that movie and really affecting.
Hard no.
Yeah?
Hard no.
This is actually, this whole category was a crime because this is Scarlett Johansson's award. And it's crazy that she didn't get for Under the Skin.
Yeah.
It's crazy that she didn't get nominated for this.
That's not on my list here.
Do you agree, or you think is that a reach?
No. I think that's like one of the masterpieces of the decade and a genius movie, and she's really good in it. And it has like a hard, weird part where she's an alien who doesn't know how to talk to people. I don't know. I mean,
who would you go? Would you go with Pike?
It's my favorite performance out of the five. The Julianne Moore thing is It's Time award. She has been good in 30 consecutive films. We've overlooked her too many times. She should have won for Boogie Nights. That's like an all-time performance to me. And they waited 10, 12 years later to give her the award. Like, no one's watching Still Alice. They're not studying Still Alice in film school.
I think I'm just older than you guys, and that movie hit me differently.
Well,
did you like Wild?
I did. Julianne Moore in that movie, that's not a movie that should have even been watchable.
Still Alice?
It's like, here's the most depressing premise of all time. Enjoy the next 100 minutes. And I just thought she did some good stuff. All right, so we're split on that one. Best Supporting Actor, J.K. Simmons won for Whiplash. Ethan Hawke in Boyhood. Edward Norton in Birdman. He was good in Birdman. Mark Ruffalo in Foxcatcher. Foxcatcher with 2 Oscar nominations for acting. And then the funniest one, Robert Duvall in The Judge.
That's hilarious to me.
It's a
Talk
weird
about
one too.
career achievement.
He already won, so I'm not really sure what they were trying to recognize. Maybe that was just a good campaign that they ran there.
I guess, but I also feel like that movie was one of those where they were like, you guys ready for The Judge? And then as soon as it came out and people were like, this man shits his pants in the middle of the film. And nobody talked about it after it was released. I feel like that was like also, I can't remember when that came out, but whenever it did, it was like, it just fell off a cliff.
Did this movie start Oscars So White, or was that the next year? Or is it maybe 2016? Because you look at the actor categories, and I think everyone's white.
Yes.
All 20.
Well, it was a big topic of conversation because of Selma. And
who should have, I forget, who was the one who should have gotten nominated from Selma?
David Oyelowo played Martin Luther King.
Right.
And
so
was
that
very
was
good
the
in that
Duvall
film.
spot.
Yeah, but he would have been the lead, I think. I mean, there were a lot of good performances in that movie, but like Oprah's in that movie, Tessa Thompson's in that movie. It has a kind of an interesting cast. But yeah, are all of the nominees white?
Yeah, all 20.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's bad.
And I think and maybe we're so much more aware of this now. But in the moment, like Duvall and The Judge and stuff like that is just so
like,
old school Oscars of let's reward this old white guy.
But the other thing too that's happening here, if you look at like The Imitation Game is one of Harvey Weinstein's last stands as far as like pursuing an aggressive campaign for a movie that a lot of people are like, this movie is okay. It's not that big a deal, but he made it seem more important than it was with his machine. And so that also takes away from other people's opportunity. If Benedict Cumberbatch is nominated and David Oyelowo was not, that's a clear connection to the Oscar So White thing, which you're right, it did start in 2015.
So that was after this Oscars heading into the...
It was heading into this Oscars, I think is when it really started.
Best Supporting Actress, Patricia Arquette won for Boyhood, Laura Dern for Wild.
So we were in support of J.K. Simmons for Best Supporting Actor?
He's amazing.
He's amazing.
That's the only one I feel.
I do think he took Ethan Hawke's Oscar.
Yes.
And it's not that J.K. Simmons gave the sort of most memorable performance, but I think that this was Ethan Hawke's chance. He like spent 10 years making Boyhood with Richard Linklater, and he's really good in it, and it was bad luck. Exactly.
Patricia Arquette won for Boyhood. Laura Dern in Wild. Keira Knightley in The Imitation Game. She's actually good in that. Emma Stone in Birdman. She's also good. Meryl Streep, Into the Woods as the witch. I don't even remember what that was. I'm sure there could have been a Selma spot there for Meryl. Meryl, they're just penciling in at that point.
It's very similar to Duvall.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good Emma Stone performance.
She was
good.
I like the meltdown. You mock Twitter. That's like one of the great memes to emerge from that whole, remember that?
Yeah.
That was the movie where I think we all kind of realized there was way more to the Emma Stone career than maybe
we gotta bring you mock Twitter back during the Democratic primaries.
Good. I'll let you start on that.
Okay.
You can
you're right behind me.
I'll follow right behind you.
Okay.
Definitely.
Sean, best original screenplay. Birdman won. Beat Boyhood, Foxcatcher, Grand Budapest Hotel, Nightcrawler. Are we okay with that?
No.
Who wins it?
I would have taken any of these other 4 nominees over the Birdman script. Boyhood, Foxcatcher, Grand Budapest Hotel, Nightcrawler.
Nightcrawler's sick. Also, Gyllenhaal should have been nominated.
I can't believe
Oh, wow. Gyllenhaal, too.
Why did you guys like Foxcatcher?
I just don't hate Foxcatcher.
I thought
why are you looking at me like I have a flower pot on my head?
It's not fun.
It's not a fun movie.
Not fun.
Can't wait for the murder-suicide. Fun 2 hours.
It's very dour, but it's a fascinating, true American story.
Good. It should have been a 6-part Netflix documentary.
I think it was
I don't know why it had to be a movie. Best adapted, Imitation Game won. It beat Sniper, Inherent Vice, Theory of Everything, Whiplash. With Inherent Vice I feel like that movie's been properly rated from an Oscar standpoint. Is there momentum for it 5 years later as an underrated masterpiece or anything?
I disagree. I think it's amazing. But, we didn't even talk about Joaquin Phoenix. Joaquin winning for Joker is also like a follow-through on missing out on nominating him or rewarding him for stuff like Inherent Vice. I think Inherent Vice has... The Master, too.
That's a bigger...
How do you feel about the goosing of the category here with Chazelle? Because it's like adapted screenplay from a short film you already made. It's not like you adapted it from a novel or
they had the rules around this stuff are so arcane and ridiculous. And I wonder if he was even able to compete in the WGAs because of this. I don't. Adapted screenplay is always kind of a fraud category for that reason.
Director Inarritu won for Birdman.
I feel like this should probably have been Linklater's.
Linklater, Boyhood nominated. Bennett Miller for Foxcatcher, which at least won the murder-suicide movie of the year. Wes Anderson for Grand Budapest Hotel.
Should they add that? Is that a way to spruce up the Oscars?
Maybe every 3 years.
Yeah. Best
Imitation Game was the other director.
Morton Tildum, who went on to make the absolutely abominable Passengers.
Yes.
Remember that?
I remember people being upset that Clint didn't get it.
I think he's okay.
Take Clint.
I think he's
that's lunch.
I think I would have thought that there would have been more love for Wes Anderson, in part because that movie didn't win anything, and this was considered like the peak of his achievements. It was a huge hit.
Yeah.
And his movies were not guaranteed hits through the years, and a lot of people love him and actors love him, and he always gets nominated for screenplay. And it's unusual for people to go both Best Picture and Best Director the same now. They're often splits.
Yeah.
There was not a split this year, but there have been a split. I think a split 3 out of the last 5 years. This was the other year where there was not a split. And I don't know, the Birdman wave just came in and took over. I don't know. I think it's fine. I think it's like an okay movie. I understand why they wanted to reward Inarritu. It's the same thing that they were talking about with Mendes, where he made the movie all look like one shot. And so it seemed like this incredible design feat. But
it had a lot of things going for it. It was about the celebration of the artistic process, the trials and tribulations of being a performer.
And a movie star.
A great crowning achievement for Keaton. A bunch of up-and-coming performers. Really.
And the director.
Quite a good Edward Norton performance.
Definitely.
I would say that.
Yeah.
And
the director.
Yeah, the director. Yeah.
Who was Gravity before this or after
this? No, that's Cuarón. He did The Revenant.
No. What's the other one he did? Oh, Revenant. That's
right after this.
That was year after.
Yeah.
What's he working on now?
Inarritu. He appears in a lot of Rolex commercials.
That's cool.
I'm sure he's got a movie cooking up.
I think the real problem with this year was that there was no number 1 starter. It's a lot of number 2 and number 3 starters and some number 4 starters, but there's no ace. And the whole looking at it as a whole reflects that. So Birdman wins for Best Picture. It beats Sniper, Boyhood, Grand Budapest, Imitation Game, Selma, Theory of Everything, and Whiplash.
I think there was a lot of hope amongst the sort of like independent-minded crowd that Boyhood was going to win here. And then there was like a Boyhood backlash that happened where people were like, who cares if you took 10 years to do this?
Also, and then there was
it's
like
not that good.
It doesn't tell Patricia Arquette's story. It's,
Right. Right. Even though she won.
Yeah.
I have conflicted feelings about Boyhood.
What are your feelings?
I thought it was an incredible creative achievement. I didn't think the movie was great, but I thought the achievement itself was great. And I remember we argued about this at the time when we were doing pods and shows and stuff about it, about whether the creative achievement should outweigh the actual quality of the movie. And some people didn't separate those two.
Well, that's actually literally my take on Birdman. I think it's like an incredible creative achievement that I just don't really care about.
And I think that this is always the thing that we want the Oscars to thread for us, is to celebrate the obvious great leaps forward or presumed great leaps forward in movies while also celebrating the things that we're going to be talking about years to come. Right?
The most upsetting thing was Fincher not getting anything for Gone Girl for me, which we forgot to talk about in the directing thing. Because I just that's peak Fincher. He's the only person who could have done the best version of that movie.
That movie has just got such a corrosive soul. I think it's just too, I mean, I guess Parasite proves me wrong, but it just feels like Gone Girl has like such a toxic heart that it's hard for people to I think people misunderstood that movie.
This is an underrated, you and I talked about this privately, and this is a kind of a complicated thing to unpack, but I think that is a subtext of the Parasite win too, is Parasite and Gone Girl tonally, and a lot of Fincher and Bong's movies have a lot in common. They're pretty cynical. They're expertly, artfully crafted. They're all like blueprint movies where everything is super designed out. They're pretty funny, but in a dark way.
Yeah.
And the Parasite wave, a lot of people just got really excited about a movie that is like pretty critical of likely their lifestyle in the Academy. Mm-hmm. And Bong was such a fun figure, and that cast, people loved them so much over the course of 3 months that I think that I'm speculating completely, but I think some people lost sight of
what that movie was about.
What the movie's about. And the difference between that and Gone Girl is David Fincher would not be like a very fun guy on the campaign trail, and wouldn't, Ben Affleck and Rosamund Pike and Neil Patrick Harris would not be like doing photo ops and laughing about Gone Girl.
Right.
Like, it feels like it's made by some pretty hard-hearted, cynical crafts people.
Yeah.
So it would be hard. But that being said, I think that there's probably going to be a big Fincher thing this year where he's making this movie Mank, which is about Joseph Mankiewicz, or Herman Mankiewicz rather. It was written by his dad 10 years ago. Netflix is producing it. It's a Hollywood story about like the making of Citizen Kane. And there's going to be a lot of like, it's time now for Fincher. Same stuff that we're talking about with some of the actors here.
But not to steal your take, but another part of that conversation that we had was what the next 5 years, how it's different if Fincher does get more lauded for Gone Girl.
Yeah,
and whether he stays in features. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think he keeps making movies, which is what I wish he did. I mean, I like those TV shows, but I'd much rather have 3 more movies.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you know how many 2015 movies 2014 movies we've done as a rewatchable?
How many?
Gone Girl.
Just one.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Is there any other one you would do?
John Wick 1 at some point would be a fun one.
I have rewatched Whiplash. I wouldn't say that it's like I go to it a lot, but I think it's one of the best movies of the decade.
I think Edge of Tomorrow would be an amazing episode.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I think that would be really
We're definitely
fun.
doing that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's on the list.
But yeah, I mean, you wouldn't do Birdman, right? You wouldn't do Boyhood.
It's a weird year. It felt weird at the time. There were a lot of things that didn't make sense, or that we were just like, whoa, why that? Especially like the Oscar so white thing, especially when you see it laid out in all these categories. It's like, Jesus.
It's bad.
And then movies that we really wanted to be great that never totally got there.
There were a couple like that. I think Most Violent Year was
Selma.
like that.
I thought Selma was good. I don't think it was great, but I thought the story was really important. Yeah. But I thought the movie could have been better.
But I remember Fennessey and I were like, when we first started seeing the trailers for Most Violent Year, we were like, they made a movie out of our brain stems. Like, this is crazy.
I thought
I can't wait.
J.C. Schindler was like Coppola. I was really, and I like his movies a lot, but.
So you think the lost performance of this 5 years is Scarlett?
Scarlett, I think Joaquin in Inherent Vice, Miles Teller in Whiplash.
Ben Affleck in Gone Girl.
Ben Affleck, Oscar Isaac in A Most Violent Year, Jessica Chastain in A Most Violent Year not being nominated is really weird. Actually, she's amazing in that movie. David Oyelowo was also in A Most Violent Year.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of cool. I mean, and Gyllenhaal and Nightcrawler. There's a lot of. We could have done a good alternative.
The robot
Oscars
pilot
episode.
in Interstellar.
No. Although we know who the best who would have won best cameo if they made that up.
And we know who wins best animal performance.
Who's that?
John Wick's dog.
Oh yeah.
I thought you were going to say Robert Duvall's bladder.
Oh my God. I mean, this is when people get mad at the Oscars and they're like, all right, enough with how it has to be. Oh, it's an overcorrection. It's like, well, 5 years ago, Robert Duvall got nominated for The Judge. This is why we're overcorrected now.
We have
because
a problem.
that was a disaster. All right, Chris, Sean, pleasure as always.
Bill,
Thanks, Bill.
man.
All right, we're bringing in Rachel in 1 second. First, when you need red wine at 4 p.m., sushi at 9 p.m., a breakfast burrito at 8 a.m., and ibuprofen at 10 a.m., here's an idea. Postmate it. It's your personal food delivery, grocery delivery, whatever kind of delivery service all year round. Anything you're craving, they can deliver. The largest on-demand network in the U.S. They offer delivery from all the restaurants, grocery, convenience stores, traditional retailers you could possibly want or need 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. That includes my house. Postmates will bring you what you need within the hour. No more trips to the store. Download the app for iOS or Android for free. Browse local restaurants and businesses. Track your delivery in real time for a limited time. Postmates giving our listeners on the BS podcast $100 of free delivery credit for your first 7 days. To start your free deliveries, download the app. Use code BS for $100 of free delivery credit for your first 7 days. Anything you need, anytime you need it. Postmate it. Download Postmates. Save with code BS. Meanwhile, Saturday night is the pay-per-view event of the decade. The decade just started, but I agree with this. It is the pay-per-view event of the decade. World champion Deontay Wilder, who knocks everybody out in really violent ways, faces Tyson Fury for the heavyweight championship of the world. You might remember their first fight. It was awesome. They're fighting again. One of the most anticipated rematches we've had. Probably the best heavyweight fight we've had since Tyson versus Lewis in terms of a hype anticipation standpoint. You might remember Fury in their first battle miraculously rising from a 12th round knockdown to finish the fight. I doubt this one's going to go 12 rounds. I don't see it. Fury's a great story. He's had some issues over the years. And he really came back. He came back from a lot of stuff. And now he's going to try to come back yet again. A historic night from Las Vegas's MGM Grand Garden Arena, Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern or 6 p.m. Pacific. Buy it now on pay-per-view. My recommendation would be to bet on Wilder by knockout because that guy knocks people out. There you go. All right, let's bring in Rachel. Rachel Nichols is here. I'm laughing. It's a Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
You just came right from the jump. So you have TV makeup face on, which I'm getting flashbacks to when I did the 2 years in Countdown.
But TV makeup face, but what about the rest of me?
Huh? Well, you're wearing normal clothes, but with TV makeup face on. I used to sometimes go out after Countdown with TV makeup face on, and I felt like I was like a different human being.
I mean, I'm sure it was cute. I'm sure all the girls were mooning over your mascara.
I just looked super tan, but then if somebody was looking at me, they'd be like, wait, do you have makeup on? I'm like, oh shit, I should probably take that off.
I did not grow up. I grew up liking sports, playing sports, so I was not like a makeup at the mall girl.
Yeah.
And so all of this is foreign to me, and I sit down in the morning and they put it on me, and that's enough, right? Then I'm expected to take it off also?
No.
It's a lot, Bill.
The thing for me, there's two things. One is I tried to, when they first started making me do TV, I was out on the makeup.
Okay.
I was just like,
so some of the guys are like, right, some of the guys are like, no powder, nothing. Were you that guy?
Well, because I have contacts and really sensitive eyes, and it would just make me look like I was stoned. So the first couple times.
You say that in a bad way.
Yeah. Well, you know, especially in HD, people are like, hey, is that guy faded?
Right.
But then I remember I took it off. I didn't even tell them. Like, they put the makeup on. I went in the bathroom and I took it off, and I went out and I looked like a dead person.
Yeah.
And there's so much light and HD, and there's a reason people wear makeup.
Yeah. We see it with guys on the show where at the beginning, especially the former athletes, will be like, no, I'm good. I don't want anything. And then after like a month or two and their wife or someone's telling them like, you could use a little bit of it, then suddenly they're getting the full nine.
I remember one time it was like a replacement makeup person.
Didn't go well?
Basically made me orange.
You could be elected president.
And I was like, do I look orange? And she's like, no, it looks fine. And we went out. And I never check Twitter if I do TV ever. I don't know if we could talk about that. Mm-hmm. But then I was like, I gotta look to see if anyone thinks I'm orange. So I checked my replies, and everyone's like, "Hey, orange man! Hey, nice orange face!" And it was just like a Jeffrey Ross roast of my orange face. And I was like, oh, so obviously I was right. I'm orange.
Yes.
So
And
I
there
took
you
all
go.
of it off.
There you go.
Do you check Twitter during the show?
Not during the show that much. We have someone who checks for breaking news stuff going on. So Twitter is sort of operational in the control room because something could happen. We're on for an hour live.
Yeah.
Stuff happens. Today, during our show, there was some news that broke about Kyrie Irving possibly getting surgery. And it's one of those things where when you do an hour of basketball a day, stuff like Kyrie Irving could get surgery is enough to make it into wanting it to be in the live show. So someone's got Twitter up during the show, but I don't check
necessarily
replies or
need
stuff.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But that's, to me, like the perfect reason to have a live show if something like that happens.
It's been great. We've had
do
random
it on the
news
fly.
break in our window where you're just, you're just like, oh, this happened. But that's what's nice about having people who can legit just talk about basketball. It doesn't have to be pre-planned. You're just rolling out the ball and chatting anyway. So new topic, Kyrie Irving shoulder, go. So there you go.
I remember when we were doing the Grantland Basketball Hour, which we only did 10.
Right.
I don't know if you know, but I ended up leaving ESPN.
I never heard anything about
this.
that. That's
something
weird. It was so
very
low
underrated.
profile
It
the
was
way
very
you left.
under the radar.
Yeah, it's weird.
But we had one where Rondo got traded. We were about to tape the show.
Right.
And we were about to tape it live. And we had every segment planned out.
course.
And then it was like Rondo got traded. And we were like, cool.
Right.
Throw away the first segment.
Yep.
Let's wing the Rondo thing for 10 minutes. And if you can't do that, you don't belong on TV anyway.
Yes.
But I always liked when stuff like that happened.
Yeah, our show's kind of built for that
Yeah.
too, right? I mean, certain shows are really slaves to the rundown, and we are not, and that's just a style thing. But we'll have stuff all the time where just because a good conversation gets going, we'll end up blowing out the rest of the block and be like, yeah, we never got to that. Hope we get to it tomorrow. Maybe we won't. So
I used to love the countdown on the ABC show.
mhm.
It had to kind of be perfect with how you've done those.
I do those.
And
so.
it's like the 3:00 game, East Coast time. If it ends at 5:48, you've got to fill for 12 minutes.
Yep.
And half of the people are like, fuck, we got to fill. And I would be like, this is great.
Right.
This is like,
Because
now we're
the
doing
fill-
a podcast.
Right. The fill is just talk about basketball.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
The
just like,
pregame
can you
show
guys
is
go?
planned out. The fill where they're like, oh, if this game ends early, but that game's not starting yet, you guys got to go on and fill.
Great.
It's great. Great. We're just going to sit around and chat.
There would be
good.
double headers too where that would happen, where it would be like, on Friday nights, the 7:30 game and then the 10:00 game and the 7:30 game just randomly ended
Yep.
12 minutes early. You'd be like, awesome. That's why we're here.
Yes. Although I will shout out our producers on the jump because that ethos of like, hey, if the conversation is good, just keep talking about it.
Yeah.
They're all in on that. Whereas some people would be like, but we cut highlights for the second topic.
Right.
And I don't want to waste that work. And the fact that they're in on a good conversation is a good conversation and our work is bringing everyone a good conversation. I haven't always worked with people who feel that way. And that's a cool thing about the guys I work with.
I did it both ways.
Mhm.
There was some where it's like the producers, especially if it's a producer heavy show, where they're like, we cut this package where you're going to talk about the 4 3-point shooters who you think have jumped up a level and they're all in motion and you're supposed to cue it up.
Yep.
But then the conversation in the moment's going a different way. And you're like, screw the shooters. But they're like, no, we have it ready. Go. We're running it now. Audible.
It's happening whether you like it or not.
But I get it because they spent time doing it.
How much do you plan for this pod?
You just saw it.
Well-
You saw my prepreration.
That's true. I
was like,
walked in and Bill was like, what do you want to talk about? But I feel like I hear you sometimes with Ryan being like, oh, I got to get to the next thing. I got to get to the next
that
thing.
one we did the first one on Sunday and we tried to structure it at least a little bit.
Mhm.
If it's a certain guest, like Iger,
Right. You have
which
a
I did
list?
2 weeks ago, I had a list in my head. I didn't have a list like
Okay.
a piece of paper, but I had in my head like start with the book, go
Right.
here, and then you just kind of try to remember the sequence. But
Right.
if you can't and it flows a different way.
You've seen Zach's lists, right?
So it's just funny that Zach's hosting anything because it took 2 years just to get him to
him
do
in
a
front of a
podcast.
microphone?
It took him another year to get him to do any TV.
Mm-hmm. And
And
yet
now he's like a host.
yes.
What are his lists? What does he do?
Oh, so if you go on Zach's podcast, as you have, by the way, I'm sure you've seen this.
Always called in
Is-
though. I've never actually been next to him for it.
So he has what would be like a legal pad. and he has crazy serial killer level handwriting and
that
notes
so
on
doesn't
it.
surprise
There's
me.
triangles, there's maps, there's graphs, there's charts, there's questions, there's topics. He's done research into everyone's filing cabinet of what they did in third grade basketball. He is, and I will tease him. I'll be like, what is on the list? And then, somewhere on the list, there'll be like Caesar salad. Seriously, where like it's either a story about Caesar salad or maybe he was hungry. I don't know. But then I'll just jump his list, which by the way, does not make him happy at all.
No, he's a very orderly human being.
Likes, yes. So I'm enjoying the fact that to me, Zach, even having a podcast is because of you. And I'm now experiencing your podcast style being so different than his.
Well,
this is interesting.
I remember we came up with the title for the pod,
Yes.
and it was sometimes when you title pods or anything, it's really impossible.
Well, did they try to market research you, or were you guys just sitting around?
No, that was just like a couple names.
Mhm.
I don't remember who came it up. I
Right.
should just claim that I made it up, but I have no idea who actually said it.
Right.
But it was one of those things where it was like the low post with the E, and we're like,
Mhm.
done.
That's it. Done.
Perfect.
And now he has his whole welcome to and the whole
yeah,
thing.
yeah. But it's like
good.
sometimes it just falls into place like that.
We were coming up with names for our show, and at the beginning, there was really a strong push to have it be called NBA Today. And I was
Oh my God.
Yeah, not feeling that
A
at
push
all.
from executives?
I'm just going to call it an internal push,
Right.
to have it be called NBA Today. And I think it was just, NFL Live, NBA Today, NBA Tonight. That was kind of what they had. So they were like, well, yeah, it's going to be called NBA Today. And for me, my idea and pitch for the show was so different from what more of that standard shows were.
Right.
I didn't want it to have that kind of name, but it put all this crazy pressure on me because they were like, well, if you want something different, you got to come up with it and we have to approve it.
Right.
So then you're sitting there with lists and basketball words and things like the low post, but you're trying to sort of make it personal in some way or something that has something to it. Bill just got coffee brought
Thanks,
into
Kate.
him.
I
Look
got
at that.
a tea.
Oh, tea.
I turned 50 and I realized that I couldn't have the second coffee during the day.
What
It was
happens
turning
to
me
you?
into a serial killer.
What? Like what?
I don't know. I just
What was happening to you?
I started to really need it the same way you need like heroin
A
or cocaine
drug.
or something, where it's like I'm fading mentally if I don't get my coffee.
Right.
And so I didn't do it for 2 days. And
Really
then
lasted a long time there.
and then it was fine.
Right.
The first 2 days, my body's like,
Was
what
this
the hell?
caffeinated tea? By the way, this is the
No.
largest thing of tea. It is a
Get a nice
venti tea,
Venti tea.
which I didn't even know existed. I thought they stopped it.
Venti tea. You realize the latte is basically, it's like a cocaine shot. That's what I would have, like a venti latte at
That's-
like 5 o'clock.
I'm having just a small tall latte
Right.
right now. Are you looking at me askance? Do you want me to give you a little hit?
No.
No? You sure?
No, I don't miss it. I have a giant coffee in the morning. It's my favorite part of the day.
Mhm.
It's all downhill.
It's all downhill from there.
I started having the lattes when I was doing the countdown, and I was just like, I just was running out of energy. And when
Wait,
you're
what
on
are you,
TV,
what are
you
you
don't
like
have
an
energy.
80-year-old from New York City when I was doing the countdown?
When I was doing the countdown, whatever the show's called. But if you run out of energy on TV, you
Yeah.
it's probably the worst
They
case
frown
scenario.
on that. Yeah. I mean, look, there are other worst case scenarios on national
Well,
live television.
looking like half dead on
I
television.
mean, it would be much worse to look orange, so you don't want that.
If I looked orange and half
And
dead.
half dead.
Yeah, that's like the worst case scenario.
The
But
ball
yeah,
game is over.
So I started chugging these lattes, and then
Mhm.
we would do these segments, and I was like, it's like, what do you mean? How dare you say that about the Pistons?
So is this tea caffeinated? By the way, the people listening
It's
to
like
this are
slightly
like,
caffeinated.
and that's where I turned off the podcast.
It's like,
where
yeah, they're
they-
talking about tea and Caesar salad,
It's bad.
all that stuff. So how long is the jump at now?
4 years? 4 years this week.
I feel
Thank
like
you so much for remembering our anniversary, asking me
4
in
years
here
this
for
week.
it.
Well, I
That's
feel
really
like the
kind of you.
Grantland Basketball Hour was like the distant cousin because Wilds was
Oh,
involved.
100%.
The producers, some of the we used to have weird players that
I don't think it's a distant cousin. I
Well,
think
maybe
it's
it's a cousin,
legit
whatever.
cousin. Yes. Yeah.
we would try to put people on that weren't on normal ESPN shows, and
Yep.
they would always be like,
exactly.
"What?
Yeah, I
You're
got a
gonna
lot.
have Steven Jackson?"
I got,
But now
I got
it's
a
like
lot
you
of
get a
that
lot
at
of
the
those.
beginning too. Yeah.
But that's actually like probably one of the best assets of the jump is
Well, yeah. For
you
me,
have to throw people out there.
yeah, and also when so much of the other stuff I did leading up to this is what got thrown into the kitchen sink of this show, right?
Yeah.
So I've been a reporter for so many years, and I know from being a reporter when you're telling the story of a basketball team, you can't just talk to the superstars of the team.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell the whole story, right? Because they have one experience, but the Steven Jacksons of the world have a completely different experience. And by the way, the guys who are the superstars don't always feel the responsibility to explain themselves fully, whereas some of the other guys have spent years and years with reps of talking and kind of having to get out there and have opinions and have cogent ideas. And it's like a basketball team. You need guys like Tracy McGrady, 2-time scoring champion. You need Scottie Pippen, who's won 6 rings and can tell me what it's like to be in the Warriors dynasty, right? When we're doing those final after NBA final. What is it like when you reach your X number in a row and you've played all those years in a row? Well, I got the guy sitting next to me who's done that. But on the other hand, I also have a Steven Jackson or a Matt Barnes or guys who were in a different position and still, by the way, won a ring, right?
Yeah.
But so they have the credentials, but we're more glue guys on those teams. We're tough guys on those teams too. You want that too? I do.
I think the glue guys are really interesting because they look at everything differently. It's almost like how some of the most interesting podcasts I've had with actors weren't necessarily the most famous actors.
Right.
You know, it was like the J.K. Simmons type of guys who've kind of done all kinds of different jobs and then had stardom, but also had it the other way too.
You have to pay attention more, right?
Yeah.
If you're that kind of guy, you have to pay attention more to what's going on around you because you're not just barreling in and doing it and leaving. And so those are people who have interesting, smart observations too. And by the way, I do want also the guys who are the superstars because Tracy McGrady can tell me what it's like to go on a crazy scoring binge. You know, I don't know what that's like.
Yeah.
So I'm very short.
How do you decide who's on the show?
Well, I don't book the show day to day. We have just sort of a pool, and then
It's almost like figuring out a cocktail party.
yeah, it's just sort of who's available that week, who's in town, that sort of thing. And then we have the kind of our pool of people, and then we go from there. I don't know. How do you decide who's on the ringer?
Well, yours is different though because you have players, but then you also have info people.
Well, that was another thing.
And you have to figure
That
out
was
what's
a
the
bit
blend
a
of player
discussion.
versus info.
Yeah, they hadn't really had that on any of their daily. It sort of brought the info people in differently, you know. And look, I used to work on NFL Countdown. I love the way Morton and Adam come in, right? Like they kind of come in with, "Hey, I'm delivering you these juicy news bits, whatever." So there's lots of good different ways to do it. For me, again, like having been a reporter and sort of wanting the show to live in real time, I wanted not every show. We do have shows with 2 players, but a large part of the time to have someone who's really plugged into the league and with like good experience, right? Someone who's been covering it for at least a decade, that kind of thing. To be able to talk about stuff in real time, who can say and add to a conversation, okay, we're doing this story because this news report came out in the Boston Globe, but also I have Jackie McMullen on set, and Jackie can talk about sort of things that weren't even in the article or not in the paper or things that I might not even know because I've been watching on TV, but she's been there.
Well, she's also the best of all time.
She is incredible, and that's why we love having her on. Yeah.
I don't have her on my podcast enough, and I don't know why. It's my fault. I'm just bad at remembering who to have on, but every time I have her on, I'm like, oh man.
Right.
Because she's the perfect blend of she has info, but she's not afraid to share stuff too. Whereas some of the info people, and I include my beloved friend Zach.
Yes.
They're giving you most of what they have all this other secret stuff that people have told them in confidence that they just can't give.
Yes.
Jackie, she can hint more at stuff.
Also, when you've been doing it long enough, you reach a point, I assume, you're this way, Jackie's this way, where you don't kind of give a fuck about what other people think of you,
Those
what
are my
they're
favorite
saying
guests.
about you,
Yeah.
right? You're just like, yeah. I mean, if she's walking on here, she's like, I'm Jackie fucking McMullen. So
Right.
great.
When do you
Come
think
at me.
when do you think Zach's going to get to that point?
I
Probably
think
like
it's
age
going to be
65?
a long time before Zach gets to
Mid-60s?
that point. Whereas you, I think, got to that point at like age 30.
I got it too early. Yeah.
Right?
I probably should have waited before I got it. Now I'm at the right point, but I
Right.
probably should have waited a little bit.
You were good. Are we going to talk about the Celtics? I can't believe we've gone this many minutes into the podcast about basketball with a basketball
I
person. We
know.
haven't talked
We're
about the
taping this
Celtics.
on a Thursday. It's running probably after some of these games tonight, but I feel like the NBA's been gone for like a month and a half. I don't like the long All-Star
Well,
break.
it's a good sign if it's only been off a week and you're in that much withdrawal. That means that it's a
It
good
was
year.
weird. The Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was just sucked. It was like Survivor. I watched Siesta Key with my daughter. I watched Big with my son. I watched
Big the movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
My son he's almost the exact same age as Josh Baskin now in that
Okay.
movie.
All right.
So it's like a
I
whole
like
different
you bringing
level
out the
of
like all-time classic. When did that movie come out?
1989.
Yeah.
That movie's eternal though.
Yeah. I agree. I just like that I'm not surprised you're grounding your kid with like the classic movies, but a lot of people don't.
What's interesting is there's some 80s, 90s movies that it almost doesn't matter when they came out.
Right.
Like I feel like Big 30 years from now would still be a movie that any kid would watch. And
Yes.
Princess Brides like that. There's some.
I have twin 8-year-olds. They
Yeah.
love The Princess Bride, right?
Right.
So, and they don't like princesses or brides, but it's really just an action adventure movie, right?
Yeah.
Has a
I
fire swamp.
sidetracked you on the basketball question.
That's okay.
It's been gone for a while. And now I'm really focused on the Celtics thing.
Well, that's the thing. It doesn't matter about the games tonight. I need to know from you where your head is at
My head's
on the
very
Celtics
confident.
and the stretch run.
I
and
need
the big
Tatum.
picture.
These last 31 games or whatever it is, this is the Jason Tatum. Can you actually be the best guy in a couple of playoff series? Show us during these 30 games that the potential is there for that to happen.
I mean, he's been great the last
Right.
few months, like really great.
It's been 6-7 weeks.
Yeah.
Where he started finishing around the rim.
Yep.
The defense that he's playing against certain guys like Kawhi is
Mm-hmm.
at a whole other level, and it's really starting to look. There's also weird, how they put these weird stats out where there's only 4 players before the age of 22 who have 2,700 points, 800, and they come up with these weird numbers.
If once you get to the third qualifier, to me, I always call those baseball stats.
Right.
Right? On a Tuesday in July, he's the third one under the age of 21 with this many points, this
Right.
many rebounds, and this many assists. And I'm like, great, I don't care. But when they're saying hey, he's averaged this many points by this age or something like that, that is a stat I can wrap my head around.
They had one that was 3,000 points, 1,000 rebounds, 1,000 assists before age 22. And
yeah.
it was him, LeBron.
That is a worthwhile
Kobe
stat.
and one other
Yes.
person. I was like, oh shit. I
Yeah.
didn't realize that. I didn't realize we were there.
Yeah. Well, part of that is always going to be a function of how much you play, right? What your
Yeah.
opportunities are and who else is on the team with you. And then also skill when those two things combine. But I want to know, so let's go through these. Who would he match up? Who would he be the best player on the court in a playoff series with?
So
And we're not counting the teams that won't
if
make
we
it.
get the 2 seed, he's better than anybody who's going to be on the 7 seed.
Yes.
Unless Kyrie's playing for Brooklyn, and even then, Kyrie's probably. It seems like
I
we're
was gonna
starting
say,
to go toward
by
Kyrie
the
being
time
out for the
people
year.
listen to this, they'll know. But it sure sounded like we weren't going to see Kyrie that much more
And
today.
we should talk about that later. So I think he'd be better than whatever 7 seed.
Mhm.
Then the next series with Toronto, it's basically him, Kemba, Siakam, and Lowry. One of those 4
Could be Toronto. Could be Philadelphia.
Could be Philadelphia. If it's
Could
3-6.
be Miami. I don't know how the first 2 rounds are going
I
to
just
fall.
figure Indiana is going to be 6,
Okay.
and then it'll be Toronto or Boston versus Indiana.
Right.
But then you get to the Milwaukee series.
Yeah.
Either he'd have to outplay Giannis, or we'd have to have a situation kind of like what happened in 2010, where LeBron was the best guy in that series, but Rondo outplayed him for 6 games.
Right. Well, and
but nobody
Paul
thought
was-
Rondo was better.
And Paul was tremendous. Come on.
He was good.
That game where the two of them were in the score
that
in
was
the 40s? Oh, that was 08.
That was 08, yeah.
Okay, all right.
2010 was when Rondo all of a sudden became one of the best players in the world.
Right.
And then LeBron really faded the last 2 games.
Yes. And then that was the taking off the jersey in the tunnel and the whole
08's Paul's greatest moment.
That one game.
That game, yeah.
Is something that obviously clearly I'm getting senile on the year, but that
No, listen,
sitting at the
you're preaching the choir,
Right.
and mixing up years.
But sitting courtside, I was courtside for that game, and it will still go down as one of the greatest sort of just moments in basketball I have been in the building for, because you had 2 guys at the height of their power going at it in Boston Garden, best fans, and just it was exceptional.
I have a lot of regrets because I didn't fly back for it, and it hurts.
Okay, well, I'm here to tell you made a mistake.
I did.
Yeah.
There's a key moment in that game. Not only is it Pierce's best game,
Mhm.
and he really goes toe to toe, and it's LeBron the year before he won his first MVP. So
Yep.
it's not full fledged LeBron yet, but
He was pretty good.
it's 90%
They
of where
both
he's
scored in the
gonna go.
40s in that
Yeah.
game.
There's a jump ball, and Pierce loves talking about this
Yes,
too.
yes.
If you ever have to kill time with Pierce, just be like, hey, can we talk about that jump
Jump
ball in
ball?
game 7? He do 8 minutes on it, but he just is kind of stronger and faster than LeBron. And I feel like that's one of those moments, the kid in high school who gets beaten up in the drive-in where he's like, I'm coming back next year and I'm going to be bigger than everybody.
Right.
And LeBron the next year, he was now
just-
a
yes.
specimen. He goes from that to then he goes to the Olympics with Kobe.
Yep.
Watches what Kobe's whole process is like day after day. And he's like, oh my God. And then he goes in that 2009 season and he's just like, he's LeBron.
Yep.
But I think that jump ball was weirdly important.
Paul sneaky strong.
Paul was, it was funny, with the Pierce Wade stuff last year, which was a bummer because
I was unfortunate. I thought that whole thing was unfortunate.
Pierce waded into it a little bit, like he, but at the same time, people were dismissing this career where he was one of the 50 best guys of all time.
Yes.
He won a finals, and he was a really unique player. Like
Finals MVP.
Yeah, and he was a strong 6'7" forward who was strong when he came in the league. And
he's on the ranked clutch all time rankings. I always kind of back to he's got his number retired in Boston Garden. Like that's the end of the conversation. Right?
And beloved, and
Right?
outplayed Kobe in 08.
Right.
Both
Yes.
him and Ray Allen did.
Yes.
I think he was one of those guys that was a little bit wrong era. I think T-Mac's the ultimate example
Oh
of that.
God. Can you
Where
imagine
T-Mac's
Tracy
10 years
McGrady?
Can
you
later?
imagine Tracy McGrady now?
I know.
Right? I mean, I sit with him all the time looking at
He's gotta
video
be
and
bummed.
whatever. You know what? He is so, there are many things that I really like about Tracy McGrady. One of the things he's so great about is he is not I walked uphill both ways to school guy. And he is not a bitter about how things did or didn't fall for him. And he could be bitter, right? I mean, goes to Orlando. Grant Hill doesn't get hurt the way he does.
Yeah.
His whole life is different, right? All this, can't get out of the first round, can't win playoff games. He went for Grant Hill, and that just never happened. And then he goes to Houston, and Yao has those injuries, and he just never has sort of that same running
And
mate
he had the injuries.
to the level. And then he gets injured,
Yeah.
and then he can't whatever. And by the way, his injury, if it had been diagnosed and treated a little bit differently, and he's talked about, I'm not going to get the specifics of the injury exactly right, but basically, if they knew now medically what they knew, if they knew then what they know now, it could have saved his knee, and it would have been a completely different thing. And load management obviously would have been different, and all kinds of stuff would have been different. And he's never, and obviously the style of the game now and the rules being different, he never sits there and is bitter about it. He does give you that smile though and say, man, that'd be pretty fun, right? I mean, can you imagine seeing him now?
I wrote a whole piece about him when I was at Grantland because it made me mad. He was kind of one of those slip through the cracks better than people realize guys. And I laid out this whole case for him. It was interesting. He tweeted out the piece.
This is back when he was on Twitter. He's not anymore.
Right. And I just thought that made me think he thought finally somebody kind of noticed. Because Daryl used to tell me all the time, he was like, T-Mac is so much better than people realize. Like all the stats we have from on the court, off court,
Dude,
all the things he does.
I covered games he played. I mean, I covered him plenty. Like he was so good. And it's funny, when we first started the show, first of all, he was the one I kept pitching to start the show with.
Yeah.
And there was definitely people being like, Tracy McGrady, really?
Right.
And I've said this a million times, my sort of elevator pitch for the show was, hey, I don't want it to feel like a PowerPoint presentation. Like, I don't want it to sort of have a bunch of monitors and that kind of thing. It shouldn't just be like sort of contained points. I wanted to feel like sitting around talking about basketball with your friends. But what if one of your friends was Tracy McGrady?
Yeah.
That was sort of the sentence. And then they were like, he's done a little countdown before. He's done a little NBA TV before. We don't know. And I was like, dude, everybody needs reps. The idea that someone's like magically good on TV the first time is insane. And he didn't even need that many reps, by the way. He was very, very quick to it, which you and I know is not always the case.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe people didn't quite realize the allure he had, especially for this generation of players. Him and Kobe going at it for those scoring titles. I mean,
Well,
Jimmy,
the other players really respected and revered him, which is something, I hit this point after I released my book where I wasn't really, didn't really know any players and didn't want to. I wanted to be removed. But the most interesting thing that happened to me over the next however many years, getting to know a lot of players and learning stuff, was how important it is when the players respect the other players.
Yes.
And Kobe was really illuminating for me, the way everybody I talked to talked about him being like, yeah, what the fuck are you talking about? That guy's one of the best guys. He's impossible to play, and listing all the things. And I think T-Mac was like that.
He's
and conversely, it's funny, like guys like Karl Malone, you talk to some of the older guys, and these people that statistically were awesome, but then if you talk to the people who played them, they're like, yeah, we could break that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, no. When we started with the show, I would say, future Hall of Famer Tracy McGrady, when I would introduce him, and there was a little pushback, and I was like, you guys are missing it. And of course, he was a first ballot Hall of Famer because
now everybody gets in.
Well, not everybody gets in. Chris Bosh very upset the other day that he didn't get in. Did you see that?
Yeah, but that wasn't. I think once post Kobe, I think they realized they couldn't have like the 9 guys getting in. And
I think it was that this
the Kobe
year
thing is going to overshadow.
Yeah, I think
else.
this year, honestly, you know what? And you know, I'm sure you've talked about it a lot over the past few weeks. We don't have to get into yet
Not as much as you. You were like on
meditation on
TV
Kobe.
24 hours a day.
I really was for a long time. But I think even before Kobe passed, that the idea of Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, and Kevin Garnett being like this trio going into the hall together, I'm not convinced anyone would have broken in with that. Any other male NBA player.
It would have been weird to have Bosh with those
right?
3.
Just sort of randomly. So even before Kobe's death, I think this was probably in the idea of the committee and this is what they would do. I'm interested to see what happens though, because there are borderline guys. Chris Webber has had a bunch of times being nominated. He hasn't made it in. Ben Wallace hasn't made it in. Chris Bosh says he's disappointed that he wasn't even a finalist this year. That did surprise me that he wasn't even a finalist. And again, I think it's just everyone was like, great, we're not going to include him, so why are we making him a final?
The C-Web thing is awful.
But when you say everybody gets in, everyone doesn't get in.
Mitch Richmond got in. Yes.
To
me, that was like a different. The C-Web thing. C-Web has things being held against him that, in my opinion, are fair and unfair.
Well, it's Terrell Owens' conversation too, right?
Well, it's like I think people see C-Web and they're just like, you should have been one of the 30 best guys ever, and you weren't. So you're not a Hall of Famer. It's like, well,
no,
he was first team All NBA during this era when we had Dirk and Duncan and KG and Rasheed Wallace, and he was one of the 2 best forwards that year. So his peak was as good as those guys, and he had injuries.
Yes.
And he kind of tossed away the first 7 years of his career by being a dumbass.
I also think people hold the Michigan stuff against him.
Yeah,
right?
But that shouldn't matter. I guess it should matter for the Hall of Fame.
It's the basketball Hall of Fame. It's the whole thing. They have college, whatever. But yes, my point is, did he earn it on the court or the field in T.O.'s case? So I'm glad he finally got in. Like, did he earn it or not?
I was more against the T.O. thing.
Why?
Because he was just a bad teammate. And I think that has to matter at some point. Like he would just blowtorch situations.
All right, but you'd have guys like Kobe Bryant who would tell you that you need to, quote, have disruption. You need to blowtorch situations. How good a teammate was Kobe Bryant in some years?
But
and
Kobe
yet,
is one of the best 8 players of all time.
I
T.O.
agree. I'm talking about that disruption in a complimentary way.
No,
right?
I get it.
Right? I mean, look, again, I'm saying this only as a compliment, right? Kobe wouldn't pass his teammates the ball to make a point sometimes, or he wouldn't take a shot to make a point sometimes. He would blowtorch all kinds of situations, and you would go back and talk to him afterward, and he was said, yeah, I'm doing it on purpose. And that he thought that kind of disruption was good for a team. He always told LeBron that. LeBron did a little bit of that throughout different seasons where he got flack for it, but definitely was sort of needling on purpose. T.O. is a different situation. All these guys are different. They're obviously different personalities, but I'm not going to say, oh, he blew up locker rooms. It didn't. Did you think that any of Terrell Owens' actions is the reason that they did not win a Super Bowl?
I thought the year after the Eagles been to the Super Bowl, I thought he completely blowtorched that season.
And you thought that like they would have gone back if not for him.
It was just, I think we've seen that football, especially guys can go too far with some of the stuff, and it's such like a camaraderie sport.
You mean doing sit-ups in the driveway is not something you'd recommend? That's weird.
Behavior. Let's take a break to talk about Wave. It's a free, easy-to-use financial software that helps freelancers, consultants, and small business owners make, move, and manage their money, bringing them closer to financial success through accounting, invoicing, payments, and payroll. Just like Chris. Who's Chris? Well, he started his own business 3 years ago. He's been using Wave ever since. He's never been confident about the financial aspects of running his own business, but since discovering Wave, he was relieved to find a service that made invoicing and payments so straightforward. Wave's free accounting, receipt management, and invoicing tools give your business the professionalism it deserves. I wish this existed back in 2015 and in the early 2016 range when we were starting The Ringer, and I had no effing idea how to do anything. Wave wasn't there for that. Now it's time to ditch the Excel spreadsheets, shoeboxes filled with receipts and lost invoices. Start growing your business. Set your business up for financial success by signing up for your free account today at waveapps.com/BS. That's waveapps.com/BS. The Kobe thing was how his career was dissected after. And look, this happens and people remember the positive stuff, but he did have that 05 to 04 to 08 stretch that I don't think he really had a sense of who he was as kind of a teammate and a leader yet.
Yeah.
I think he was the first one to admit that 4 or 5 years later.
Yeah.
I knew when I heard the news, I was like, this is, you almost couldn't wrap your head around it, but it was like, obviously this is going to be a massive deal. I didn't expect it to play out the way it played out, where this is like the biggest celebrity death of our lifetime.
It's interesting. I'm thinking about, I was on the, as you said, I was on the air immediately right after. So you have all the stuff you say on the Sunday, on the day, kind of getting out on TV as people are tuning in throughout the day. People hear the news sort of in waves, right?
You were in a tough spot. I was actually watching some of that.
Yeah.
Where you're just thrown on the air and you like can't even wrap your head around what happened, but you have to talk about it.
I thought I was pretty functional and
You
good until as I was literally, and they're doing the 10, 9, 8, we're about to go to you thing, and the guys start doing the lead in to introduce me. That's when it crossed that Gianna was with him.
Right.
And there was one time of the 20 times I think I was on the air on that Sunday where they were coming out of something and the thing crossed that Gianna was with him, and I'm just sitting there and they go to me and, I've heard you talk about this. Like as a parent, I think it's two completely different levels. There's being upset that Kobe Bryant died, and this person who you and I knew personally. And I mean, I've known Kobe Bryant more than half my life. Like his career just intersected with mine in a way where we were both young together and trying to make it and all of this stuff. And we had all kinds of conversations about that and what that meant. So there's all of that. But then there is the idea of him, look, going down in the however long it was, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds with his daughter, knowing as a parent, you're sitting there. It's hard for me to even get out the words about what that must be like for those 10, 15 seconds. And the tragedy of that. And Kobe Bryant died way too young. And considering all he had done in his years, I could have told you the next 20 years where he was going to do even more crazy, incredible stuff. The man won an Oscar 2 years after retiring from one of the greatest careers in sports, not just basketball, right? So we know his next 20 years would have been full of accomplishment and interesting things. But he did live a full life in the years that he lived. When he died, you list his accomplishments, who he impacted. That would have been enough for an 80-year-old. Gianna was just getting started. And the tragedy of that, to me, is something that on live TV, I started tearing up on live television. Like I couldn't help it. Like it just, that is so hard. And someone brought up to me later that day, like she could have been the greatest women's basketball player ever, which sounds like, oh yeah, you say that when someone dies. But think about it.
Who knows?
She's Kobe Bryant's daughter.
Right.
She has been, so first of all, we know genetically, look at all the sons and grandsons of NBA players in the league or whatever that come, Steph Curry and all, having some genetics for it is obviously important. And then she had been trained, and by the way, relentlessly trained, right, by Kobe Bryant since age 3 at how to play basketball, footwork, everything. She was hell-bent on going to UConn. So she was literally going to go to women's basketball finishing school. Yeah. And then she had aspirations on the WNBA and being the kind of player we had never seen before. And there's no reason why she couldn't have done that, right? She literally had all the tools to do it. There's just so much that got lost there. And of course, 2 other girls with her. I mean, it's so tragic. And the tragedy of that moment on live TV was hard. The next day, when we did a little bit more of, you had your chance to wrap your head around it. We talked to Trace McGrady. We talked to Jerry West on our show. We kind of had people coming through who had played with him, Robert Horry, Brian Shaw. One of the things that sort of when I was trying to figure out how do I start the show, what's the opening monologue about Kobe, that I kept coming back to was he defined an entire era of a sport, and he defined a place in the way that nobody else had. So when you think about L.A., who's the most famous person in LA?
Well, I mean, it used to be Magic, and I think Kobe kind of took a spot.
So for 20 years, it was Kobe Bryant. It's not an actor, right? There's no specific actor. Hollywood is famous about LA, but there's no specific actor that you're like, he's LA. And actors are always pretending to be someone else anyway.
He really, from when they made the finals after the Gasol trade, it wasn't close to happening until that second wave of his career happened when from 2008 to and then when the Achilles season, because that was when he really started to figure out, okay, I gotta I got to do some things better. If my legacy is going to be a certain way, I've got to open up more and I've got to talk to more media people and all that stuff. But
you can't tell the story of Los Angeles.
You can't.
Without Kobe Bryant.
But I mean, you
can't tell the story of the NBA without Kobe Bryant. You can't tell the story of this part of American life without Kobe Bryant. And that is why I think it's the celebrity death that has sort of shook people as globally and as much as it has, is that there's so many different fabrics that he is a key thread in, and you've ripped that thread out.
And it's also just a long period of time.
Yeah.
Because you think, like, I moved to LA in November 2002.
Mm-hmm.
So he's still playing with Shaq, and they're the 3-time champs.
And he had already been LA to a lot of people
Right.
then. It's not like you moved here at the beginning of him being LA. He was already LA to a lot of people.
And then I was trying to get Clipper tickets in 2004, and that was when they thought they were getting them, and they made a couple trades to open up the cap space. And then he was like, I'm staying with the Lakers. Thanks anyway. But that whole stretch, then that other stretch, and then somewhere between 2008 and 2013, I never thought anyone would pass Magic. And even like when I did TV with Magic that year, and he was like, we would talk about it because Magic, he still feels like,
of course,
he would always be like, no, Kareem's the greatest Laker of all time.
Right.
But then he was like, but Kobe's probably the greatest Laker of all time now. He's been on the team the longest and
all right. So
did all this stuff.
There's two sides of that conversation, right? Like, who's the greatest player to put on a Lakers jersey? That's
Kareem.
Kareem.
Yeah.
LeBron wants to be in that conversation, that kind of thing. The greatest player, not while he played. So the second category is who's the greatest Laker, right? So who's the greatest player to ever put on a Laker jersey, even for 5 minutes?
Well, it has to be that. No, there's 3 conversations then.
Okay.
The greatest player to be wearing a Laker jersey when he was actually at a great point in his life.
So you're breaking down category 1.
LeBron's probably, he's the second best player ever. So he's the greatest guy who's ever put on a Laker jersey. And then who had the best Laker career.
Right.
Kobe it was, the amount of time is just more than what Magic did.
Right.
Magic was 12 years.
What's interesting is I had that conversation on one of our shows 6 months ago, and the overwhelming consensus of the guys on set was the greatest Laker was still Magic Johnson.
That's how I feel.
You had the conversation after Kobe's death. Magic Johnson came out and said Kobe was the greatest Laker. And then a lot of people are like, well, no, Kobe's the greatest Laker. And I can't tell if it's the haze of the tragedy.
The career,
of
but Magic's just peak was he was just better. I mean, he's still one of the top 5 guys ever, and he won multiple MVPs. And
it's a good problem. If you're a Laker fan, it's a good problem to have, right?
Yeah.
Gee, Kobe or Magic, which was the better Laker? I mean, it's 2 of the best careers in the history of basketball.
But the difference is basketball is just way bigger during Kobe's career than it was during Magic's career. I talked about this.
Magic's career got cut short. Let's not forget that either.
His career got cut short, but also like they weren't on that much.
Right.
If they were here in LA and you could see him, but in Boston, I saw him on CBS on Sundays every once in a while, and then in the playoffs sometimes.
Right.
And basketball became this 24/7 sport at some point over the last 12 years. And just...
You're telling me.
I mean, now it's like literally 24/7.
When we started The Jump, it was a half-hour show. And that was only 4 years ago. It was a half-hour show just during the season. And in just 4 years, we are an hour show. We go year-round. And I would say some of our peak best ratings are in July. And
well, you left out the part that they wouldn't even have an NBA show from the last 4 years I was there. I used to talk about it with Adam Silver. I was like, how do we get them to have a daily NBA show? They have a daily NFL show. And I'd be like, I don't know why they won't do that. He would get mad about it. But
it was
the ESPN people would tell you like, no, there's no way to sustain a rating. It's not going to happen.
It was a back and forth. I wouldn't have left Turner if they hadn't committed to do it. And I didn't think I was leaving Turner. In the stretch, whatever, I had been at Turner at TNT and had my own show on CNN. It was a great combination. I could do kind of 2 different things. I love being part of TNT basketball. They let me do TBS playoffs for baseball. That was really fun. I mean, it was a great time. I love those guys.
Nothing like those dugout interviees.
Don't mock.
Those managers.
Don't mock.
You're interviewing a grown adult who's wearing
pajamas,
a baseball uniform.
In pajamas.
Nothing. That's a career highlight.
Don't mock me. Look.
A 7-year-old guy wearing a baseball uniform.
Bill Simmons, I was on the field when the Red Sox won the World Series.
Oh, that's wonderful.
There you go.
In St. Louis. What do you do with those dugout interviews? Because those managers are like, it's not like basketball where you go like, what's going on out there? And it's like, we got to stop them from shooting the threes. Baseball, it's like,
Talk about pitching.
I really hope we hit the ball better.
Talk about pitching. I
Hope
mean,
we throw
people
more
do
strikes.
baseball broadcasts. It's not like there's not an analysis to be had.
I'm good with no manager in-game interviews ever. I mean, the coach
it was
interviews.
fun for me, Bill. It was fun for
I'm
me.
sure it was fun for you. What do you think about the NBA coach interviews?
You know what? I think that making the sport more accessible to more people is a good thing. The XFL was not something I was like by nature super interested in, but I like the way it's being presented. I like the access you get. I just think that people say, oh, the media. It's not the media. The media is a conduit to the fan. The media is just sort of the vehicle, right, for fans to get access to the game. And I think anytime fans can get a little bit more access to the game, and yeah, most of them are nothing and inconsequential, but you do get a couple great Popovich, Rick Carlisle. I mean, so Brad Stevens gives you a moment every once in a while. You get moments from these guys every once in a while.
I'm out.
That are good.
I'm out.
You're out.
You know what I love though? The post-game interview.
Post-game interview.
I like grabbing the person right after the game because they'll actually say something.
They will.
And
yeah.
you were really good at pulling.
Thank you.
It's the first question's crucial.
Yep.
And then they let down their defense a little, and then like the third question, you can really get something.
And also there's a night having done the work ahead of time gets rewarded in those moments, and I like that, right? So I've covered the NBA for 2 decades now. So every single guy playing now, I was there when they came in. I have done the work of talking to them year after year after year. I've checked in with them. I still go to a ton of games. That's just because I have a studio job. I go to games. One of my big things with The Jump was that The Jump would go to games, that the show would be on the road. That was definitely not like the norm for a studio show at ESPN during the season, just to regularly sort of jump and go to games.
Not hard to put some chairs and 2 cameras on the court. They would always act like it was like they were building a plane. It's like, just throw some chairs in the court and let's go.
I just think it wasn't the way people thought of it. But for me,
I like it because
you're right there.
Yeah, it's exciting.
You can't legit talk about all these guys and say with authority that you know what you're talking about if you haven't talked to them.
Right.
Right? So to me, even at the end of games, getting to talk to it was a way to show the work of being like, hey, this guy and I have had conversations now for 10 years going, here's another one. And you almost look at that like another continuing in the conversation. And again, that is something that gives fans more of a way in and influenced The Jump when we started it. Because again, to me, it should just feel like a conversation. It should feel like sitting around talking about basketball because those are the best interviews I do. A lot of the good interviews I do, I'm not even asking questions at the end of every question. I'll sort of bring something up the same way you're doing in this podcast, right? Yeah. And then they jump in and then you jump in. And that to me is just as good an interview as a, who, what, why, or where question.
What solution did you have to the height discrepancy as you're interviewing these guys after games?
I had a very established technique.
6'9".
All right. So this is something I put a lot of thought into.
I'm sure you solved
you
this
bring
like
this
it was
up
a math
mockingly?
formula. I wasn't mocking you. This is a genuine question.
People were probably like, well, wait, how short is she, right? I want to bring up the fact that at ESPN, and you know this, you worked for ESPN
you're like
for
Vern Troyer, but you're...
Well, I will say this. When the standard boilerplate ESPN language of your contract is, I don't know if you ever noticed, there's a paragraph in there that says this is the job that they're hiring you for, but they do have the right to reassign you to any part of Disney. Did you know that was in your 16 years of ESPN contracts you never paid attention to?
Yeah.
So I live in fear they're going to cancel The Jump and reassign me to the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs ride because it's close. It's really close. So I'm like 5'4" on a good day, right? And my rule was if the player was within a foot of my height, that was okay, right? Because I would wear heels. The player would be within.
So you're talking basically
inches, so 6'4" and under.
So even Kobe is too high.
Oh
for
yeah,
that at that point.
No.
Yeah.
So 6'4" and under. Steph Curry,
any small forward or tall shooting guard is out.
Whatever. But yeah, so like the Steph Currys or the whatever. There are players. You don't have to be a shrimp, but like 6'4" or under, that's fine. And I would wear heels, and so it'd be like 10-inch discrepancy max, 9 inches, whatever. Anyone over 6'4", and I would check. I would check just to make sure that I wasn't like thinking of the person wrong or whatever. I would bring them over to the scorer's table. Ask them to sit. You know how you like sit half lean
down
on the scorer's table?
Yeah.
I would stand and they would sit on the scorer's table, and that's how we did the interview. And it got to the point where I did this enough and for long enough that they would be, the PR person is the one who brings the guy over and they'd be, oh, it's Rachel. And I had players who would take the PR person by the arm and say, no, we got to go over to the scorer's table.
They instinctively knew.
Right, Rachel does it over there. They didn't know that I did it over there with them, but with shorter guys, I didn't necessarily do that. But I had to have a whole thing.
That's really smart, though.
I mean, you know,
because LeBron's
some
like
of us,
6'8.5".
Yeah, it's not pretty me next to those guys. And then you're interviewing someone's belly button. It was really when I started
you
doing
have, like,
Shaq.
You're reaching up
Right.
like you're grabbing for an apple or something.
I think it was when I first started having to do it with Shaq, no joke, where I was just like, this is obscene looking. Like, it's just not right. It is. I'm sorry. So I was like, you sit down. I was like, you sit and I will stand and we will do this. And then, you know, there you go. So
those guys are the best guys, though, because for whatever reason, the NBA has the most fun people to talk.
Yes.
Out of all the sports.
Yes.
And I don't know how that happened because it certainly wasn't the case when I was growing up.
I think that
we had Magic
era,
and Magic's like, man, fucking Magic's the best, man. What a great interview. Now
Right.
there's like 20 Magics.
I think it's a whole bunch of things, right? I think that guys are much more sort of camera ready by the time they get to the league because they've grown up seeing video in their life more and being around video. And how many pictures of your kids and video are in your phone?
Oh my God.
Thousands?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How many videos have your kids been in? Tens of thousands of videos over their life. How many videos do you think that Larry Bird had been in before he got to the league, right?
I mean, he was a legendary, terrible interview.
Right, but he had been
year.
on the local news maybe 12 times, maybe 20 times. Your children have been in tens of thousands of videos. So by the time these kids get to the league, first of all, they're much more used to what it does and what it means to sit in front of a camera and talk. They're much more comfortable. They're much more themselves because they're not like, oh my God, the camera's on. And I think that the NBA in this era of the NBA, and I give David credit for the end of his time and certainly Adam credit for what he's done, encourages all this stuff. David wanted stars, right?
Yeah.
He, you know, from Magic and Larry on, it was stars, stars, stars. So he would encourage guys to be stars, do it, show your personality, wear what you want to wear, be mouth off, do that kind of thing. Now, by the way, wear what you want to wear took a hit at one point during the 90s. But I'm just saying that the idea that these guys' personalities were encouraged and not discouraged is something that I think has then spawned what we have today.
And it trickles down. I was watching high school semifinals on Channel 56 here in LA.
You need a life, Bill Simmons.
We knew one of the kids. It was Windward against somebody. And this 10th grader on Windward, his name's Kajani something, but he went to my daughter's school, but he was a couple years older. But he's a sophomore, and he's like the 7th highest ranked sophomore in the country.
Yes.
So they win this game, and they interview him after. And it was like, it was like watching Will Smith promote Bad Boys 2. I was like, how the fuck is this guy this good? He's 16.
Because his mom, just like you, has 10,000 videos on her phone of him from age 2 on.
He's laying it down. I was like, throw this guy on Inside the NBA.
Right, there you go.
High school sophomore. I wouldn't have been able to have a conversation with anybody. These bigger interviews you do.
Yeah.
One thing that I feel like has shifted with the NBA at least a little bit is, you know, all these guys have their teams, right? They're basically like, there's no difference between Leo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt.
Wait, all these guys have their teams. What do you mean? Guys have always had teams in the NBA.
I mean, they're
Bill.
teams of people.
Like their
group.
They're okay.
That watch out for them.
Don't become Phil Jackson here. Careful with your words.
No, I'm talking about like.
I'm teasing you.
They have like a media strategist. They have their agents.
Some guys do.
They have a manager.
Not every guy does. Some guys do.
They all have their little group, though, that they trust who looks out for stuff.
If you think that Joel Embiid and Jimmy Butler have media strategists, you haven't spent that much time with them.
Jimmy Butler definitely does not have a media strategist. Yes. Embiid, I don't know, though. Embiid has his agents, I think he trusts.
Yeah.
But I think these guys are very careful about what they do. And it's like, oh, GQ wants to do a cover story about
absolutely.
me. Yeah, I'll do the cover on that. Great.
Yep.
You have to do an interview with them. Don't say anything too crazy.
Sure.
You get an hour with James Harden.
Yep.
Ask him this, and we'll have somebody sitting there. It reminds me of almost like what's going on, what's happened with Hollywood over the last 40 years, where you have, when people do these interviews now, there's some sort of reason they're doing it. They're not just like, you couldn't go, hey, LeBron, come on the jump on Tuesday at 3. He's not doing that. But if he had some documentary he was promoting, maybe he'd come on for a segment or something. Is it harder to do journalism when there's all these kind of
it depends on the
asterisks
guy.
now?
Depends on the guy. We are fortunate enough that I'm able to get interviews without someone promoting something per se. So normally, I like to talk to players when they're going through some kind of change. I think that that's the most interesting, right?
Like Paul George coming to the Clippers.
Paul George coming to the Clippers. I sat down with Paul and Kawhi their first, like when they first got to the Clippers together, because that was a huge change, obviously, for both of them. How did this happen? What does it feel like? All of that kind of stuff. How did we get here? Where are we going from here? All of that is a great moment. I sat down with Zion Williamson this week, and he is going through a huge change, right?
Yeah.
And to me, I talked to him when he was drafted, and that was a huge change. We did an interview then. I was pretty excited to talk to him this week, and I was kind of glad that he had the 10 games under his belt. I was excited to do it now as opposed to, some talk of doing him before he started playing. And when he hadn't been, when he was still injured, and we were just like, you know what? Like both sides were kind of like, let's wait. Because this change of what it has been like since he started playing has been crazy, right? His first 10 games have been insane.
Well, he's beloved.
He is, and
he's my favorite player.
I was gonna say with good reason. I hope
love Zion.
I hope you were not going to get into a why are people liking Zion so much, because we would have to have words.
I like him because he's amazing to watch,
He
and
is-
anytime
jumps
he's on
off the
television,
screen.
it's the game I want to watch
No,
because he's playing in it.
It's amazing. He jumps off the screen. But what was interesting to me, and what we talked about, the biggest chunk of subject we talked about in this interview was, dude, he was in high school 2 years ago.
Right.
He was a high school senior going to English class with his teacher asking him to write poetry lines
In like South Carolina, right?
South Carolina.
Yeah.
Like.
But he was a
come
House of
on.
Highlights star at that point.
Yeah, but that's still. I mean, you know that, and I
knew
know
him
that.
as a junior because he was just
But-
this dude on
Right,
Instagram
but
that
you
was
were
dunking
watching
over
Channel
everybody.
56, 10th graders, whatever.
Right.
That is not the norm.
Right.
He was able to go through his daily life as a high school senior without
True.
this. And in the last 2 years, people, like he told me in this interview, people are following him to restaurants. Like he's going to dinner and someone's
It's going to
following
get way
him.
worse than that.
I know, but if you're 19, he's the fourth youngest player in the NBA. He's
Yeah.
still young. How old's your oldest?
Jason Tatum is still the youngest player in the NBA.
Is he really?
No.
I was like, wait a minute. No, he's
Now,
not.
that was a big thing with Jason
It
Tatum.
was for a while. I was like,
how
wait a
young he
minute.
was.
I was like, that's not possible.
He's only 19.
But when you say something with certainty about the Celtics, it makes me think. It makes me think, maybe.
Wait
Is
a
Bill
second,
right?
what?
How is that possible? Is Bill true? Is Bill right? Is that
Tatum
true?
and Brown combined are still like 6 years younger than I am.
No.
I mean,
Doesn't
they're
shock me.
still kids.
You're old now. You're
I'm-
at the I don't
I'm
give
really
a fuck
old.
stage.
I'm the
You're
old
old.
guy.
You're at the I don't give a
No,
fuck
I'm not at
stage.
the Kornheiser stage yet. That's
Well,
the
that's
stage I
the
want
real.
to get
That's
to.
it. We all want to get there.
Where I give zero fucks.
Yeah.
I'm happy to
that's-
give my opinion at all times
Yep.
on anything.
Yep.
All right, so you do Zion.
Right. So
What-
that
so
did
what's
not
your-
require a bunch
what's
of
your goal with that
handlers
interview?
or
Because you know
Again.
you're not getting that much, but you
Yeah.
also want to get, like, what's the number one thing you want?
that topic was the number one thing I wanted to kind of talk to him about.
Your life is so different now. What's it like?
just what is it like to be going through this, right?
Yeah.
Because we are seeing what you and I think could be the beginning of another LeBron, right? The beginning of another like iconic Magic Johnson, another iconic player.
I'm just in fear all the time he's going to get hurt.
Well, sure. Yes.
I hate the way he walks. His
I'm sure he
gait,
doesn't like how you walk either, Bill.
No, his gait just makes me nervous. He's got, he's kind of his knees are out, but his legs are going
I wish people could see
in.
what you're doing right now
I'm
with
just
your
like-
body.
I just
Bill is standing here. He's sitting, by the way, imitating walking while he's still. You're still sitting.
it was a bad
you
imitation.
have both elbows up in like an L
body's going in a
shape.
lot of directions. It makes me nervous. And then like he's just jumping over guys.
Yes.
Like guys are going in for a rebound, and Zion's coming in sideways and
He
just
did a
taking
block
it from
the
them.
other
He
day
makes,
where
him
his
and John
head was
Morant makes
above
me
the
nervous
rim.
too. Yeah, John Morant makes me really nervous because he doesn't
That's
give
how
a
I know
shit.
you're a parent. When you were younger, you were like, man, look at these fucking cool things people
know.
were doing. And now you're like, oh, that makes me nervous.
Well, he's John
gonna
Morant's
hurt
trying
himself.
to dunk over 7-footers from 15 feet away, and
And
it's
it's
like
working.
Yeah, I know. It's just I do get nervous.
we want to see it.
So that is true. When I had kids, you start getting more nervous because I
Yes.
remember Derrick Rose used to make me super nervous when I watched him early
Right?
in his career because I
You're
was like,
projecting.
man, settle down.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
So yes, that was the biggest thing I wanted to find out because that's this moment of his life, right? So I hope that he has a long career. I will interview him a bunch. We will check in with him at different stages. This moment is about what is it like to become crazy famous and just to sort of start to understand what you can do on a basketball court because that's what this moment is about.
Yeah.
And then in 2 years or a year, it'll be a different moment. I always say that doing interviews has been one of my favorite things and parts of this job. And it's something that I will want to always do. And it appeals to me so much because you get this crazy sort of window into someone's life in that moment, right? And then if you can do it long enough, you can check in with them over and over again. And to have a front row seat to anyone's life over, I look at LeBron. I met LeBron when he was a senior in high school. It's
Yeah.
the first time I interviewed him. And I've interviewed him as recently as this year 17 of his career. And to have a front row seat to anyone's life for 2 decades, that's pretty cool. I mean, it could be a school teacher in Milwaukee. Like, that would be a pretty cool thing to be able to check in with someone year after year after year. What's changed? What's going on with you? You know, how are these things happening? What are you experiencing? When the thing isn't teaching school in Milwaukee, but it's operating on this incredible international stage with some of the craziest athletic feats in the world with any of these guys, it becomes such a cool thing to be able to keep doing. So I'm excited to sort of see Zion at the beginning of these first chapters and then continuing to tell that story throughout what I hope is and think is going to be a really crazy good long career.
One more break to talk about Square. They make that little white reader that lets anyone take credit cards, but running and growing a business takes so much more than payments. That's why Square built so many more tools that can help, like point-of-sale software, invoices you can send right from your phone, easy-to-build websites to help you sell online, access to business loans to help you manage your cash flow, purchase new equipment, or whatever it is you need to do to grow your business. No complicated contracts or weird fees. You always get your money fast, even instantly. Square makes all these tools. They're all in one place. They're all built to work together, whether you're an online retailer, a restaurant owner, a hairstylist, a skydiving teacher, whatever. Square has tools to help you, no matter what size or stage of business you're at. See all the ways Square can take your business from square one to whatever's next at square.com/go/BS. Loan subject to credit approval, issued by Celtic Bank, member FDIC. So the worst interviews are Harden and Westbrook. They're just not giving anything.
I'm gonna tell you something. James Harden. I have an interview with James Harden that's coming out next week.
Yeah.
We did it a couple days ago.
Did he say anything?
He said a lot.
Get out of here. I don't believe it. No way.
I'm going to check in with you after it runs. I don't want to give too much away.
Stop it.
Look, was it the most sort of did he spill the beans the most of all time? No. Of course not. But he said some stuff that will make some headlines.
Really?
Yes. I'm just going to leave it at that.
And then Westbrook just has complete disdain for all this stuff unless you're talking about Tom Ford.
I can't think of I'm sure someone can come up with it. We'll be listening to this and will send me a tweet or something. But I can't remember the last sit-down television interview Russell Westbrook did.
He doesn't care.
That was just sort of an interview that wasn't promoting something, that wasn't about something, like as you said.
Fashion.
And is usually associated with like a magazine or something like that.
What's the Giannis upside for an interview these days?
For me or for him?
No, just in general. He's pretty good now.
He's great. I love talking to him. I saw him a bunch at All-Star.
He's thoughtful.
Yeah, he's
never had him on a pod or anything.
He's so smart, and he also has experienced. I mean, think about the change he's gone through, right? Think about his life and just sort of, again, like you could tell that story without even the basketball in it.
Right.
And it would be super interesting. And now also he's the MVP of the NBA, which is insane. I was with him this weekend at an event where he was talking a little bit more candidly. It was a small thing. So he was a little more candid and open about being an illegal immigrant in Greece with his parents and how they were not in the country legally and that they really had to that his parents were like, don't talk to too many people. We can only trust so many people to turn us in or not turn us in, like that kind of stuff. Talking about, and he's told the story before about how there was a local sort of coffee, breakfast, diner shop where he tried to get a job when he was a teenager because his family needed money and they didn't have enough food. Yeah. And he was like, I need a job. And the guy looked at him and he knew the family from kind of around the neighborhood. And he was like, you need to go to school is what you need. And you need to focus. You play basketball and you need to go to school and whatever. And it wasn't even really basketball. It was the school that the guy said. He's like, you need to go to school. He's like, just come in the mornings and I will give you breakfast. And he gave him and his brothers breakfast. And not for any reason, not because he thought he was going to become Giannis Antetokounmpo MVP in the NBA, but because those kindnesses from strangers is literally how he survived being a teenager. And then goes on to have this crazy career and adaptation, and his work ethic is off the charts. I mean, obviously his physical gifts are crazy, but we saw him when he was drafted, right? That kid wasn't destined to be an MVP.
Well, he also
worked
grew 3
himself
inches,
into
which
it.
really helped.
He did, but he put on a ton of muscle and just did a ton of work on his body, and he has been in the gym religiously and still is to this day.
That's why they drafted. I did that draft, and he got picked 13th, and we were kind of like, okay. Yeah. Nobody thought
No, he was a name on the list. He was a name on the list.
Yeah,
you didn't know much about him going in. You didn't know much about it going out. Right?
I praised it. It's on my tombstone. I praised it. I was like, good pick. I like the value there. I had no idea.
You know what mine is?
What?
I said they should. I said everyone should have taken Luka first. I feel like good.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's on TV.
There's a few of us.
I said it.
We'll invite you to the meetings. Me and KOC were on there.
I was like, ha! It's on record. It's on video. My big thing about that was that draft was so interesting to me because it told the story of front office people being more scared to make a mistake than they were more interested in being right.
Well, and also people just devaluing the EuroLeague.
But I mean,
and it's like it was almost like what he was doing didn't matter. I know, and they didn't care.
Of the second best basketball league in the world,
and he played like 90 games.
But
it
I
was
think
the dumbest.
Yes.
It was stupid.
Yes.
I see.
What
the
are your
Phoenix
other?
side.
What are your other? I'm on record, and it turned out.
I've had some good ones.
All right, tell me. What are your best?
The Minnesota passing Curry twice. I had a heart attack. I was doing draft diaries, so I've had some good ones. That one. Chris Paul dropping to 4th. I went nuts on that. I've missed too. I've had some misses, but Darko going 2nd. Went crazy for that.
We were just having the Darko conversation today. Like, I don't obviously. You should have. They should have picked Melo. They should have picked Melo. They should have picked Melo. And when someone's a talent, and Melo was such a high school star too. It's not like he came out of nowhere. But they had Rip Hamilton. So at least I understand what Joe Dumars was thinking. It still wasn't the right decision in retrospect, but Joe Dumars wouldn't make that same decision.
Well, and there was
again.
also like the draft workouts and stuff. This was before people realized not to overvalue the draft workouts and really start trying to find out more about the person.
Yes.
And I just feel like work ethic, like switching sports to football, it makes me so mad the Patriots didn't take Deebo Samuel because it's like, everything you read about that dude, he's like first one there, last one to leave. And it's like the perfect Belichick guy. It's like, we've succeeded with these guys all the time. And the basketball is the same thing. I don't think you would have any idea about Giannis. No. But somebody like Tatum, if you did the research, which I think the Celtics did.
Guess who did? Guess who did the research? Danny Ainge.
Right.
Guess who didn't?
Right.
the
they
Sixers.
knew from St. Louis.
That, by the way, is going to go down
Duke.
as one of the great heists of all time. Danny gets upset with me because I did a sit down with Danny earlier this year, and I said to him, you know that I say on TV all the time that people should hang up the phone when you call. He's like, Rachel, don't say that. Don't say that. That's not true. We do fair trades. I was like, it's just not true, Danny. You've taken the lunch money of the last 6 people that you've made a deal with.
He got criticized when he made the trade. So anybody who goes back now and says, like, he took a lot of shit for not taking
highway
Fultz.
robbery. He got Jason Tatum and a first round,
He got the Kings pick.
And the Kings
pick.
pick.
The
right?
bummer was the karma from that trade. We got screwed with the Kings pick last year. They just randomly won 40 games.
Right.
And then this year we had the Memphis pick. They're just randomly going to make the playoffs. And it's like, these were these two,
Right.
It's a bummer,
well,
but
you
the
know
Tatum
what,
thing worked out at least.
Also, and I know the story of Kyrie did not end the way Boston fans would have wanted it to, and the idea that he would become this franchise player.
We don't discuss him on this podcast.
I understand. That trade was still, even with the way things worked out, that trade was still in Boston's favor. So
the sneaky thing that happened with the Celtics was Horford leaving. Because I think
that's also in Boston's favor, don't you think?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Because they were
I thought you were
going
to say that was a hit.
No, that the fact that they're ready to give him like 3 years, $90 million, and I still think he's a valuable rotation guy, but he's not Al Horford. He's not in his prime anymore, and those are the kind of contracts that you can't come back from.
Well,
where you're
see.
paying.
Philadelphia's got a couple of those.
Although everything's so the contracts are shorter. Like in the early 2000s. When did you start doing the NBA for Turner?
Well, no, I started doing the NBA for the Washington Post.
But when were you on TV though?
I did the NBA for ESPN first. I was at ESPN for almost a decade, and then was at Turner for 3 years, and then came back to ESPN.
Okay.
So, but yes, I was doing the NBA, and I was in DC for the Washington Post when Chris Webber had his 7-year contract. So all of those guys, that's what you're talking about, right? The Juwan Howard,
the
Chris Webber,
mid-90s to the late, probably like the 2007 range, where if you gave somebody a 7-year, $106 million deal, and 2 years in, it's a catastrophe.
Yes. And by the way, they didn't want to be there anymore. But they didn't really have any leverage because they still had 5 years left on their deal. This is the position Karl Anthony Towns is in right now. And then, by the way, sorry, I'm going to time out. I am not saying or reporting that Karl Anthony Towns doesn't want to be in Minnesota. Someone's going to take that out of context. I just meant that.
Are you worried about the aggregators?
Yeah.
I'm going to say it then, and I don't care if I'm taking it out of context. He signed that deal. He grabbed the money, and he was like, if it doesn't work out, I'll just try to push for a trade next season.
You can't push for a trade if you got that many years left, though.
I'll believe anything at this point. Honestly,
look what Jimmy Butler had to do to get out of there.
Yeah, but he got out. All these guys get out.
It took,
or they get bought out.
Took a lot.
DeMar Carroll's like, I'm not happy with the Spurs anymore.
Yes.
I'd rather go to another team. They're like, cool, we'll buy you out, and next year your salary will count against our cap. It's like, How about just saying, hey, Damari, show up to work. We
Right.
might need you.
Well,
We're
I
paying
mean,
you anyway.
That's what Greg Popovich did with LaMarcus Aldridge, though, is that LaMarcus still had time left on his deal. He was not happy with the way he was being used. He didn't think that he was sort of playing the style he should be playing. He talked about wanting out, and he and Pop sat down and had dinner. And I asked Pop, I said, so what did you say to him? And Pop was great, because Pop is great when you get him in the right mood. And he said, well, I told him if he can work himself out of trade for, I think he said, LeBron James or Kevin Durant. He goes, if he can work himself out of trade for Kevin Durant, I will drive him to the airport. I said, I'll drive you there myself. Unless you can work that out, you're staying here. So we better work this out. And then they had a productive conversation about, and Pop, again, to his credit, said, I learned from that dinner that I was trying to force my style of play on him, and I could do a better job letting his style of play dictate. And he had a much better season the next season. So guys are not, I think there was a narrative for a while that like, they're all forcing their way out right and left. And obviously Jimmy Butler, that whole situation and some of the other situations, Anthony Davis fed that narrative, but
that
they're all a
narrative's
little
not
bit
over.
different.
That's just the way the NBA is going to be now.
I think it just depends on what year of the contract the guy's in.
If these guys did this with relationships, nobody would ever get married. Or if they got married, there would be a lot of annulled marriages. It's just like, what's good lately?
Right.
Okay, I like that.
I like that. Well, guys are signing, to your point, guys are signing shorter deals now. So look at the Clippers, right?
Shorter deals with a ton of leverage.
Right. Kawhi and Paul are actually only there for 2 seasons. The contracts are longer, but they're player options.
The Clippers didn't know that, though.
What do you mean they didn't know it? They signed the contract.
They didn't know the 2-year out thing when they traded all those picks. I'm positive they wouldn't have done that.
I disagree.
They did not know the 2-year thing. I think that was one of those things like, oh, and by the way, after they had already gone down the road with this stuff. I don't think they knew that. I really don't.
All right.
I don't think that one came up.
All right.
That's a lot to give up for 2 years.
Yeah, but you're giving it up for the possibility of them. The Clippers needed that trade. The Clippers needed Kawhi to come then. If Kawhi had not picked them and picked the Lakers, which was really the other option he was considering, and Masai Ujiri will tell you he thinks that too, what would that have meant for the Clippers franchise? After all they did right. You had Clippers season tickets for, I don't think you still do, right? Do you?
I sure did.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
So you, Mr. Clippers.
They finally paid off.
You, Mr. Clipper, tell me.
I'm still way in the hole.
After all the Clippers did, getting the organization right, getting the right owner, getting the right front office, all the smart, shrewd moves they made, all the way they rehabilitated the reputation of the franchise, if this summer Kawhi Leonard had looked at them and everything they did right, and the Lakers, and think about what kind of mess the Lakers were in at that point with Magic Johnson walking away and everything else.
Yeah.
And he had picked the Lakers instead, that would have been a just death blow for the Clippers organization. They had to get him to sign. They had to make the trade for Paul George.
The more I think about it, I think they should have played chicken with him. I think you want to come to the Clippers. I don't think you want to play with LeBron.
I don't think it was, look, and now I'm not speaking.
I really think he did not want to play with LeBron. This is all speculation
because Kawhi has not shared his deepest, darkest, innermost thoughts with anyone.
And never will.
But I think that the Clippers were his first choice. The idea of starting his own thing or having his own thing or being the guy was his first choice. But I don't think he was interested, and this is just my opinion, in going to a subpar team where it would be him playing in the same building as LeBron and Anthony Davis, but not having someone next to him that he considered of that top 10 player level and having to go into the same building down that same hallway night in and night out and be the other guy on the other team that wasn't going to make the playoffs as far or anything.
Maybe should have
like
gone
that.
out of Toronto.
People in
that
Toronto.
That team would be the best team in the league.
Kawhi and Dine. That
would have been unbelievable.
They tried.
How's it going with Goodell?
I see him every once in a while and stuff.
Do you really?
I do. Not that often because I'm not that much football stuff anymore. But we have a lovely chatting in a hallway in front of other people, smiling relationship. You know those kinds of relationships.
I really felt like I needed other soldiers on the frontier, and you really delivered at that press conference.
I'm glad I could be there for you.
I loved you for life after that.
I'm glad I could be there for you.
There weren't a lot of us.
But look, there's so many times where like you got to just ask the question because it's sitting there right in front of everyone's face. That's true in some of these interviews too, and guys know that when they sit down with me. I don't do ambush shit. Like that's not my thing. And I will tell, if I'm going to ask guys tough stuff in an interview, I will tell them on the way in. I'm like, hey, I'm not shying away from this. Mark Cuban, after that sexual harassment report came out, came on the show that day. And I was very open with him. I said, you want to do this because I'm going to ask you the tough questions.
Right.
And you have to. And by the way, that's what the NFL in that moment didn't realize. But like, if you were in a situation where you fucked up, like that's the smartest thing to do. Let someone ask you the tough questions, answer them the best you can, and then everyone can move on. It's when all those questions are still lingering because no one's you haven't allowed anyone to ask them.
It's
you
kind
shut
of, it's
everyone
like how
down.
Bloomberg handled that. Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no, that's the opposite of maybe.
My question for you,
Yeah.
because I'm coming to you in a key moment of your life. How are you doing with the Tom Brady uncertainty? I'm checking in this difficult time for Bill
I'm way
Simmons.
more worried about Kyle.
Are you thinking also
Nephew
of leaving
Kyle.
the Patriots?
No, nephew Kyle does not remember life without Tom Brady,
Right.
his favorite player. And I said to him last week, like, hey, if we got Teddy Bridgewater and Brady left for like 1/3 of the money, would you be cool with that? And Kyle's like, fuck that. So, but all of us, I don't know. This feels to me like Kobe's last 2 years in the Lakers, where it's like this ceremonial giant paycheck. Thanks for everything, but
No,
you can't
it's
actually
not
compete.
No, that's not.
He's
the same
going to be
thing.
43. There's no track record whatsoever of him. It's only going to get worse. It's not like he's going to be like, whoa, what a comeback year for Brady. Man, he's moving better than ever.
So do you want him to not resign?
If we're going to pay him $30 million a year, then they should just, at that point, it's like, what are we trying to do?
All right. So
is this like we care more about
you're
Brady?
Robert Kraft. What decision are you making?
I would tell him, I would probably let him go.
Wow.
I would.
I can't believe these
It's
words are coming out of your
football.
mouth.
You can't, it's not like in basketball, at least you could say, all right, we'll pay Kobe $25 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
He'll walk off into the sunset. He'll take a bunch of shots. We'll quietly rebuild and get some lottery picks, and
Right.
then we'll be able to retool. You can't do that in football. You can't there's no tanking a football season, and Belichick's never going to do that anyway. No. He's more concerned about his legacy than anything.
Yes.
And he's not going to pay Tom Brady $30 million. So I actually think he's going to leave.
So now I know what's going to get aggregated. Bill Simmons wants Tom Brady off the Patriots. That's what's going to get aggregated.
I don't want him off the
podcast.
Patriots. I don't want to pay him $30 million a season and not be able to compete because he feels like he's owed money. I think it's crazy for Dak Prescott to make $40 million.
What do you think is out there for Brady, though? Do you think that he's going to come back to the Patriots a little bit like, maybe guys are for something else for less?
My hope is that this is all like a big song and dance to try to put pressure on the team, but he's not actually going to leave because you don't want. Do you want to be Hakeem in Toronto and Patrick Ewing in Seattle?
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Emmitt Smith in Arizona?
What do you think his options are? And I don't mean to get paid because someone out there will pay him to have Tom Brady. The Chargers, right, are rumored to pay him. Is that
My
right?
fear is that he really, honestly, it's like a Tom Cruise thing where he feels like he's achieved this higher being status.
Right. And then
oh no, I can absolutely play until I'm 46. I figured this out. Like he really
he definitely
fervently
thinks
believes that.
You know that he thinks that.
I know he does.
Yes. So.
But it's at what point do you go, I believe this so strongly, I'm going to play for the Vegas Raiders.
That's my point. My point is that he can get the money somewhere else. We know that. We know that some team.
But where that has.
But the question is, will those options of where he can get the money feel so cheap that he won't want to do it? That it would be bad for his brand or legacy or however he thinks of it, and therefore we'll go back to the Patriots and being like, okay, a little bit less is okay. Because do you think he will have an option, another good option out there that will both pay him and not feel?
Should be the Chargers.
So you think that would feel okay?
If I was the Chargers, I would pay him like $90 million for 3 years.
If you were Tom Brady, would you go to the Chargers for $30 million a year?
I don't know the history of acrimony with him and the Pats, but there's clearly something way
there.
off.
Yeah, we know.
Like he clearly feels like he took less.
Yeah.
It was going to be made up for him, and it actually wasn't.
Yeah.
But the whole thing about I need more weapons and stuff, like they tried to get him more weapons. You know, they spent their first round pick back-to-back year on a runner and a receiver. They traded a second round pick for a receiver. Like they did try, they just got him the wrong weapons. But if your solution as a quarterback is I need more weapons, that could be any quarterback in the league. Like Mitch Trubisky could say that. I need more weapons.
He could say it.
Allen Robinson's not enough.
I mean, he could say it. But do you think if you're Tom Brady, do you think that it feels okay to go to the Chargers?
I would hope it doesn't.
Okay.
Kyle, you would hope it doesn't.
Nah, I feel dirty even talking about this.
Kyle doesn't like this at all. I have a last question, but I was going to throw one curveball at you.
Okay, go.
I read a book about Mike Nichols.
Yes.
Your family member.
Yes.
Your father-in-law.
Yes.
This book was called, I'm trying to read 75 books this year.
How you doing?
I'm pretty good. I'm at 10.
Okay.
I'm on a decent
February.
pace.
That's pretty good.
Summer I'll really be able to make up, I feel like July, August.
Okay.
This book was like Mike Nichols from 150 people that knew him best or something. I didn't know a ton about him. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, he
I
was,
couldn't believe
he
the
was
way
an
people
incredibly
talked
impressive
about
guy.
him. So
yeah.
was he impressive even like you're having Easter dinner with him and he was like that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, look, I met my husband when we were teenagers. We went to summer camp together.
Yeah.
He was one of my first boyfriends, first love. And when I met anyone in his world, his parents, friends, whatever, they were just his family or his friends or anything. And then 10 years later is when my husband and I got back together and dated as adults and seriously. And that's really when I got to know the people around his family. And, you get blown away by just how smart everyone is. And he was just brilliant. He was a brilliant guy and kind and warm and obviously very funny and responsible for so many things in modern American culture that people don't realize. But now I assume you do from reading that book. I mean, he and Elaine May kind of popularized improvisation on a national level. And
I didn't know any of that stuff.
All of that
I knew
stuff,
a little of The Graduate, but the 1950s, what he meant to and then the whole thing when he's producing these really famous plays and directing
Annie.
them. And all, yeah.
I mean, there's so much stuff. You're like, right, he directed The Graduate and he won an Oscar. That would have been enough for anyone. But he also brought you, 6 of the most famous plays in American culture and also kind of spawned the birth of what became, I'm not going to credit him for Saturday Night Live, but you know what I mean? That whole culture of doing stuff. He started Second City. I mean, he just did a tremendous amount of stuff. I was very lucky to be able to know him and very lucky to be married to who I'm married to. I'm very lucky to.
He was also representative. In this book, the book didn't totally go into this, but there's this whole era, and it feels like we're moving into a different version of it, but where you had like him, you had Lorne Michaels, you had Graydon Carter.
Yep.
This kind of like New York elite that controlled all these different versions of media and content, but were also like very worldly, had all these friends
Really
and had these
smart,
parties.
Just smart. Just really
So I wonder
smart.
like what's the next iteration of that?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's still some of that in New York. I mean, I lived in New York for almost 20 years before I came to live out here 4 years ago. And it is very different, right? The sort of, living room culture is just very different, that kind of thing. But I think there is a whole circle of people who live and work and operate in New York and entertainment who wouldn't dream of living out here. And then you have a whole group of people, obviously, who live out here. It's cool. Nice.
It was interesting reading that book about it's this pre-internet world of people. The way they communicated was they would have parties and dinners and they would get together and they would make an effort. And now it's like, you feel like you're in contact with everybody in your life. You don't even have to see them.
Right.
But I was fascinated by him. I thought it was a great book. I would recommend it. It would be. It's one of my top 75 books of 2020.
I love this. I'm going to check in with you throughout the rest of the year to see how you're doing. I want like a Bill Simmons pace. Like, are you going to have to cram 20 books in December? How is this going to go? Are you going to get cocky after September and be like, oh man, I read so many books this summer, I got nothing. And then all of a sudden in December, it's going to be like a little dicey.
Well, you have to do the whole, you got to sprinkle in a couple like Bob Iger book kind of length.
Right.
Bob Iger's book was like 190 pages.
Right.
And you bang it out in 2 days.
Right.
And not only was it a great book that I enjoyed, but also now I'm on to the next book.
Right, you're on to the next book.
But you also don't want to rule out like the 600 pager every once in a while.
Right. What's the meatiest book on your list?
I'm rereading some stuff that I've read in the past. So I'm mixing like new ones and old ones, but all nonfiction.
Kind of cheating.
No, because I think when you read a book once, you forget most of it. And there's some ones that are really valuable books to reread.
Okay.
Where,
All nonfiction
especially like
is
when you're
interesting.
older, there's some stuff. Yeah, fiction screws me up. I read fiction and then I can't handle it. What do you read? Do you read nonfiction or fiction?
I read both, but I do find that I absorb what I'm reading. So if I'm reading, there's so many books out there of like the best books of the year list, and they're all like a haunting tale that will leave you in tears.
Or true
and I'm
crime.
I'm like, I can't read that right now. Like, I don't know if it's the having young kids and sort of that my emotions are more, like my nerve endings are more raw about tragedy or anything like that. But there's a lot of books where I sort of read what they're being praised for, which is, will leave you feeling hollow. But I'm like, I don't need that right now in my life. I can put that book off for a couple years.
The weirdest thing about reading books is, like with sports or movies or whatever, you have the internet and you have all these people to immediately share the experience with. And then you read a book, and like I finished this Mike Nichols book, and I'm just looking around.
Right,
I'm like,
no one's ever talking about it.
I'm ready to talk Mike Nichols. Anybody?
And here I am walking into you and walking.
This
boom.
was great. It was like
There
a
you
month
go.
ago. I would have had more questions a month ago.
That's
But yeah,
totally
no, I felt like my brain was going to mush with not reading enough. So it's been good.
It's good.
It's been good. It's
All
always
right.
good to read.
All right.
Rachel Nichols, thanks for coming on.
Me,
jump.
coffee, tea.
I
we're
look
happy.
forward to you're going to be ramping up in the playoffs, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. We're on the road every Saturday right now for ABC, and then we will be doing our usual traveling circus during.
Do you
the
bring the
playoffs.
kids when you go on the road or no?
I don't know because
Yeah, that's tough.
I mean, also like, what are they? They're not interested. So yeah.
No, I remember my kids are pretty young. One of the countdown years in the Miami-San Antonio finals went 7. But game 6, I was so excited to go home. I hadn't seen my kids in like however long.
Right.
And they're up 5 and I'm texting my wife, I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah,
and then,
you can't.
and then
you
all
know,
hell broke
you
loose.
know better.
I'm like, oh my God, this is a secret.
You
It's like,
know
oh,
better.
Ray Allen.
So
no.
wait, that's amazing that the yellow ropes and all of that is this great story for all of these basketball fans, and for you, it's the 5 minutes of texting your wife being like, "I'm coming home."
I was I was getting sick. Like my body was starting to break down. I was like, I just want to come home. My daughter was like, she was, I think 7, but it was just that
Yeah.
sweet spot with little girls, like
Right.
6, 7, where they're just like the best people on
Yes.
the planet to be around. Now I have a
Yes.
14-year-old, not the same. It's a lot different.
she's
I'll
a
just
good
leave it at
soccer
that.
player,
She's a
so.
nice person. Rachel Nichols, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
All right, thanks to ZipRecruiter. Thanks to Fox Sports Premier Boxing. Don't forget, Saturday night, the pay-per-view event of the decade. Deontay Wilder, the knockout king, the bronze bomber. He's facing Tyson Fury again for the heavyweight championship of the world. I hope it's as great as the first fight was. 2 undefeated rivals squaring off. There can't be a draw this time. Somebody's got to go down. Don't miss a historic night live from Las Vegas, Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern or 6 p.m. Pacific. Buy it now on pay-per-view. And thanks to Square, more than a little white credit card reader, a whole system of tools built to run and grow any kind of business from point of sale and payroll to invoices and online stores. Go to square.com/go/BS to see all the ways you can take your business from square one to whatever's next. I'm back on Sunday night. Me and Russillo doing our weekly Sunday night NBA thing. I'll be coming back from the Celtics-Lakers game at that point. So there'll be a lot to talk about. See you on Sunday night.